Right, we're back for another episode of Summoning Insight. It's actually going to be the second during MSI, because obviously the first one was the preview episode, and we've done the play-in. I have to say, when you do the play-in angle, like, this is where I'm a bit torn on the way this format goes. Because on the one hand, Monty, if I take it in isolation, it actually is way better if you ever want in the modern day to see a Western team play a top Asian team, to have it be in a best of three. Because actually, as you saw with Fnatic TES, it gives you at least a chance it could happen. All I'll tell you is this, Monty. Obviously, I won't say where, but I'm within the betting sphere still. And if you go, the first round matchups are ass, my dude. Like, everyone except G2 was like a 10-1 underdog. And then what you realize when you think about it is, yeah, but they are in a best of five. Like, it's actually so implausible you win 3 out of 5. So basically, even though I will say, I do think to this day, it is an affront to my soul as someone who loves competitive games that, like, TES and fucking T1 have to go through a plane while, like, you know, fucking G2 just sits in the main one, like, well, come on now, let's see if you deserve to play against me.
And Team Liquid more egregiously.
That does make me sick. Like, I do find that fucking gross. But at the same time, like I say, what I've learned with Riot is they fucked up the scene anyway, mate. So you basically just got to take, like, the little wins when you can. So I do think there's some benefit to watching the planes, even if maybe it's overblown still.
Well, we were talking about this on Power Spike, and I guess play-ins at MSI and Worlds felt better last year because of novelty reasons a lot of the time. And especially because old MSI format had that 60 best of ones into, 3 best of 5s, which is one of the worst tournament formats I've ever seen in my entire life.
At least matches, fair play. Yeah, the real matches at least.
Yeah, and so now we get rid of this in 5 days, and the majority of the tournament is just this sick double limb bracket. And yeah, the first round is going to suck because of the way that Riot decided to basically seed the event. I mean, Riot made this suck by refusing to do the same bracket draw format that they did last year.
All because everyone said it can't be the same regions. So there you end up with this.
And by the way, last year was basically randomly the worst possible bracket draw, which was extremely unlikely to happen again.
Yes.
Now, the upside to the drawing the bracket in this way is we're going to get much better, semifinals and more interesting later matches. So I do think it can be successful. And even the lower bracket matches are likely to be somewhat interesting. So I'm not, it basically, we got to get through the next few days. And after that, we should have some really good matches.
Here's the nightmare fuel, though, because I've learned, sadly, and I don't actually blame it on individual players. I actually think the choking narrative in League of Legends is disgusting when you consider that, as I've always said, in Counter-Strike, you would have played as many majors as the best player in the world in League gets to. We have 2 per year now, but we used to have 3 before. Like, people, like, if you don't know, guys, there was 19 CSGO majors. Like, think about how long it took to get to that kind of a number in League. You'd have had to play the entire history of League the whole way, for an insane amount. So one thing I've always thought is gross about the choking narrative is it means you can never trust what you should want, which is what you've ended up with here, which is Gen.G and BLG. Obviously, in theory, you want them opposite sides of the bracket because you only want them to meet in the final and then the upper bracket final and the grand final, right? The downside is you can never trust them to fucking get there. So as again, if I want that Knight versus Trophy match, they have to win all the games, don't they? And all I'll tell you is I've got trust issues in this fucking game, Monty. I don't know that I'm ever going to get to see that game. I've been waiting a long time for that best of 5. Still haven't had it. So I hope I get it this time around.
Well, it's okay because it's not like we weren't robbed of 10 years of Faker versus Rookie. True. So surely we will not be robbed of 10 years of Chovy versus Knight now, right? Because Riot needs to get all of the little itty bitty regions and NA, which is still a major region, even though it has worse viewership than CBLOL, and
I want to ask you about that.
Hopelessness at the top competitive level.
This is a point I made on Twitter. So one of the things that really pisses me off is, look, I favored Fly to beat PSG just because, like, in theory, if they all play up to par, top side of FlyQuest really good, like they did with the first time around. But they're doing that thing again, Monty, where even NA people are treating FlyQuest like they're subhuman cretins for being able to lose. And it's like, I said this on Twitter, why does Riot just one day announcing teams from Taiwan, literally a region that won Worlds, by the way, teams from Taiwan are now minor region, and then everyone goes, all right, so they all suck then. And then I asked the follow-up question, which no one's given me an answer, which is, by that logic, why is LCS a major region? As far as I can tell, it's just because Riot games are American. Like, I can't see any other reason, because if you ever look historically, like...
It's because they sold franchise slots for $10 million.
There you go. There's one then. Nothing competitive though, you notice. It's not like the teams are that much better or whatever. Like, why aren't they?
I mean, NA has made one semifinal at Worlds
ever.
Yeah, it has never been due to competitive reasons, right? It's because US is a big money market, and they at one time, not currently, had significant viewership within that region. They then completely misplayed their hand when it came to continuing to get young people to play League of Legends. As well as understanding why the league was successful, tanked the viewership, and now here we are with a non-competitive, non-viewed region that's just shoehorned in. And the reason is because they can't get rid of it now, because if they were to, let's say, take away slots from NA, the owners would be in revolt, because the owners paid $10 million and they expect three spots minimum for Worlds. And because it's true that Worlds exposure is what gets teams, the top teams, a lot of the sponsors. It would very much harm them to have a reduced role within the international tournament ecosystem. So the reason why it's still a major region is because Riot themselves sold these slots, and they made it so there wasn't any flexibility. And yes, I mean, that's the sad thing, is that Taiwanese teams have typically done better than, on average, than American teams at international events. They've, the old Flash Wolves was the one that would occasionally upset Korean teams.
Dude, they've done it lots of times. They did like 4 events or something mad, yeah.
And I think what happened, Thorin, is that a lot of those players ended up going to LPL because they can speak Chinese. And so then we saw a gutting of the scene, and Riot didn't want to support this infrastructure anymore. And because they hadn't sold franchise spots, and because the top players from Taiwan can go compete in China very easily, they thought, okay, well, we're not really hurting the Taiwanese player base, the professional player base, because they have another way to go get paid.
By that logic, no problem. Take any out. They can just come to Europe if they want to play. We've got all the ARL teams as well. Yeah, speak English. We're all speaking English in teams, boys. Just hop on over. Because I'll go one further. I mean, I made this point when Dom was talking last year about like what we're going to do with the slots. It's like, bro, if you want to change slots, go the other way. Just only have LCK and LPL waiting, and have everyone in the planes. Have all the European teams there. If they're good, it'll give them a warm-up, literally. Like for G2, it might be good to play the warm-up before you play a best of 5. Also, like, why do any of these teams deserve it? I don't care. Again, like, the G2 super team can't just warp this region forever. The real G2 hasn't done that in ages now. They've just been an also ran at Worlds, or like a good team but didn't make it. So like, I actually think for real, this is where Riot has to shit or get off the pot. Which is it? Is everyone equal in some egalitarian nightmare where we all get the same slots? Because by the way, that didn't work. Or are we doing it like a real tournament where we're making judgments like you're a minor region, you're a major one? In which case, why are we insulting T1, the world champions, by having them play in the plane because they lost to Gen.G, who would thrash G2 and T1? You know what I mean? Like, the math doesn't work out to me.
What are you talking about? T1 is the second seed, is equal to all other second seeds, including FlyQuest. As we saw in the head-to-head. It was a very close and competitive match. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But I think the answer to your question, Thorin, is they're simply going to create another international tournament, but they're not going to have it between, it's going to be Rift Rivals-esque, I would guess. I think they're just going to...
I'm going to quickly change my shirt. It's on inside
out. Which is, I mean, really, I think what they're going to do is bring back Rift Rivals, because we are going to have more of inter-Asian competition, and people want more NA versus EU in the West. And that's fine. I think that you can have this kind of competition. And for those of us who enjoy elite competition, more LCK versus LPL or more Asian competition is great. And also for the plebs who want the monkey knife fight, then NA versus EU is also going to be very entertaining. And it'll be entertaining for me as well, because we don't get to see any NA versus EU because of the way these tournaments go, basically.
They also just failed with that because they made that stupid concept like some Ryder Cup bullshit where you're all on the same team. It's like, that'll never make sense in esports. If people don't know, the most famous lie in esports player interviews, and no one knows this better than me, I've done all of them, is when you lie and say, like, shame we were eliminated, like second best Danish team, but I hope the best Danish team wins. No one wants the best Danish team to lose more after they're eliminated than the second best Danish team. Like, you hate that your fellow are going to outperform outperform you and make you look shit. Yet there's no team spirit there. So the actual premise should be obvious. Just make it an actual thing where you have NA and EU, but it's just a competition. You know what I mean? It's just another bracket. And then you all play like an old IEM, and then you have one for LCK and LPL, and it's sort of like just a regionalized tournament. That'd be dope. We'd all watch that. Take out all the other fugazi shit and just have it be a real tournament. Yeah.
But I mean, the only way they can justify, continued engagement under their current model is to fragment it, because the competitive nature of these teams is so, different in quality, right? And so I wouldn't imagine that they're going to institute another international event where we're going to see the West get stomped by Asia. Like, we already have 2 of those. Do we need another one? And it'll satisfy both sets of fans, the fans that want to see the worst competition, but between Western teams, and the fans who want to see the best Asian competition only and more of those teams. So it makes sense to me to bring something like Rift Rivals back.
And also, to be fair, there is the old Saudis. We're going to have that Esports World Cup. That could be interesting. If they do, here's the problem with that is I just want to know the format. If the format's good, I'll be interested.
I mean, and the team invitations, right? I think one
of
the
gets a lot of the big ones. Didn't they do something stupid? Like it sort of got leaked that some of the like logos or something like that. You could sort of see it was a lot of the major orgs.
Right, but the thing is, they're going to invite their partner teams first. So, probably not FlyQuest, even though FlyQuest outperformed the other teams in the LCS. Like Cloud9 will probably get in over FlyQuest, just because Cloud9 is most likely a partner team within the structure, because unlike FlyQuest, they have more divisions and more kind of global clout. And because the whole purpose of this Saudi Arabian experiment is to get the greatest reach possible, FlyQuest is still, not the most well-known team, nor do they have as many divisions or historic success or brand value that Cloud9 has. So I doubt they'll be going.
I mean, my obvious joke would be, how dare you, as FlyQuest, the brand, with what you've done with your fucking brand narrative, attend that tournament? I mean, I know you guys really care about the environment and growing trees, but that isn't the way I'd produce the compost to grow the plants.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
offensive, isn't it? I agree. Just like what's going on over there, mate.
It is. I mean, we'll keep going on about it too. We have to keep bagging about it because we're the only ones who are going to do it. We're the only ones who are going to stand up to this, unfortunately. Yeah, I think with FlyQuest too, I really wish they had undergone a rebrand, because I think their brand is just complete throwaway.
Just passing it. Who cares anymore? Yeah.
So I mean, I think they could have done something much more interesting. FlyQuest, the brand, I think it was based off of like the Eden's son. The Edens are the billionaires who own the Milwaukee Bucks. The Eden's son's like guild or something like that. It was a stupid name, and basically they had no money because the Edens weren't giving them any money, so they had to come up with some interesting spin. So that's why they did like the tree planting, which was smart, I think.
I mean, it was iconic. I'll give them that.
Yeah, given the resources that they had, which was nothing, in order to come up with that for the FlyQuest brand, I thought was clever. But at this point in time, where they have significant funding, like there's not really an excuse, and there's no legacy to this name and no affinity for this brand, so we might as well just redo it.
Now, speaking of FlyQuest, the League of Legends team, before we even get into all the rest of the flame, I'm just going to start where we always had to start. It's the reason why you were never hyped to watch them play internationally. Right, here's an obvious question I have, right? You know, they're going to tell you all sorts of bullshit like, well, we're developing our support player, and, if you give him time and experience, like, no, what happened was you're now literally, these all count, by the way, these aren't warm-up tournaments. You played the LCS, you could have won the LCS. You've gone to MSI, in theory, you're supposed to make it to the bracket stage. Like, why are you entering an international tournament without a bot lane that has any chance? Like, I actually think, by the way, if there weren't lane swaps, this team would have been even more fucked.
Yes. I mean, that's 100% true. And we discussed that the lane swaps was kind of a way to hide their bot lane in many cases. And it's not like Betty and Woody had some world beater performances either. Like, this was not the strength of this roster for sure on PSG. But it was an underperformance kind of across the board. I will say Masu did step up. Like, at times he looked actually very good mechanically. So I do have hope for Masu. I think the problem with their bot lane is that while Busio has been acceptable, not outstanding, but acceptable in the regular season, now we've seen him go through these playoffs. He was completely terrible in high pressure situations. Not even like a little bad, but just incredibly bad. offensively bad
Yeah.
in the LCS playoffs. And again, here, once we get into this tournament, there are some real flaws that start to show up, starting with game one of FlyQuest versus PSG. Because here's the issue. Nautilus is an incredibly high priority pick at this tournament. And they first pick Nautilus on blue side, and Busio is terrible at Nautilus. And so basically, you don't ban it. You feel like you have to take it away, but you're using incredibly valuable picks to give a champion to a guy who cannot hit anything with this champion, who cannot make any play. And so it ends up being complete garbage. And I will say, like, at the start of this tournament, Thorin, I was encouraged by FlyQuest play because I thought they played a terrible game one where they just opted into A-ramming and they wanted to do like front-to-back team fighting versus a Rumble Jarvan composition. And they got baited into just engaging in mid lane versus PSG Talon, even though Rumble has Ignite. They have more TPs. Well, I mean, technically Woody has TP on Tom Kench, but he's not going to be splitting. Let's be real. That's not when you're doing fasting Senna and you have a Tom Kench who's farming. You're not using that TP to answer side waves. Like that's not a thing. So they have practical TPs, let's say, on their solo lanes, and they just refuse to split push with their advantage. They refuse to use Talia walls to zone people off objectives, and they lose the game. However, Thorin, they come back in game two and they do all of those things. They're actually taking care of their sideways, applying pressure, using Talia walls properly. So I was encouraged. I said, oh, wow, their coaches came in, said some shit to them, and now they're doing it a lot better. And we got to see them kind of have a significant improvement over the next couple of games and play better as a team and do the things that they should do with their champions. We fast forward to the T1 game. They're not expected to win this, but they absolutely shouldn't get bopped in the way that they did. Game one was the 17-34 game, which is just so embarrassing because this wasn't like the Mad Lions game. T1 was running Azir, Senna, Viego, Tom Kench, Ornn. This is a scaling composition. You can't lose this game in 17 minutes. Like, that's almost impossible. Like, T1, which surely should have been shocked to draft that comp and then win in 17 minutes.
That was some Samsung White against TSM 2014 shit, exactly. It's like the actual level of flex on that's hilarious.
Yeah, and I know as other people have pointed out, this is a case too where we didn't even have two Rift Heralds anymore, and two Rift Heralds makes it easier to end the game faster because you can push all the way down one lane much quicker. Right? Even though there are Void Grubs, in the long run, I think the Void Grubs do more than two Heralds, but in 17 minutes, two Heralds do much more. So they didn't have two Heralds, they had one, and they still were able to, do this 40 seconds faster, or 40 seconds slower, rather, than the Mad Lions game that, became infamous. This is more embarrassing than that game, though. And the other thing that's so embarrassing about it, Thorin, is that they had an advantage. They had a pretty nice first blood on Zeus in the top side. But then, I mean, this is we're going to see what basically the core of everything that's wrong with FlyQuest, you just see unfolding in the next few minutes, which is that Bwipo TP's back to top lane. He then, for no reason, walks forward and takes an incredibly bad trade, which we can't see because it's off camera with Zeus, and we don't have pro view, so we don't know why he was doing it. I think everybody I've talked to about this says that, I believe that it was completely unnecessary. So instead of just being patient and waiting for the wave to push back into him, he takes an incredibly bad trade versus Zeus, which means that Inspired, who's on Graze, has to come into the top lane to bail his ass out, which then means that Inspired can't farm very effectively on Graves, and his position is known on the map, so he falls behind on a farming jungler. But I mean, this is just a total, self-inflicted wound here, right? It's an unforced error that Bwipo made with an advantage that he should have had. He goes back, he buys 2 ruby crystals, TP's back into lane, and all of a sudden he's at 1/3 HP. What the fuck happened? Like, you can't do that. It sucks all of the pressure out of the map when you do that, and Inspired has to go triage. But that is what Inspired has had to do this entire year so far, is random triaging. And people, I'm not being an Inspired apologist because I think he played pretty badly in the final series against PSG. But I can understand his frustration if the game plan is they have a game plan when he goes in, and then his lanes fuck it up, and then he has to go into that lane to save them. It's not selfish, by the way. If he was being selfish, he would have just let Bwipo to twist in the wind there. But the problem, if he did that, was that they definitely would have lost the game because Bwipo had no passive, he had no flash, he would have been dove on the wave bounce after taking that damage. So, it was really bad. And even in the next game, so they go for the lane swap, they go for the strong side invade, and T1 adapts really well because they have Ashe and they realize that Ashe obviously is super strong at level 1. There is no team in the world that knows Ashe better than T1. You do not let T1 have Ashe ever. Ever. Do not let them have it. You are not good enough. Imagine that, why this was so egregious, I think, from the FlyQuest perspective, is that what is the scenario with Ashe? You let them have Ashe. Remember, your bot lane is your weakness. You're going to let T1 double Hail of Blades lane your bot lane, the lane that has been struggling, the young lane, the rookie lane? No, you can't do that. So you have to lane swap. Well, T1 obviously reads that. What do? They just send Gumayusi bot in the 1v1, send Keria into the mid lane, chunk out Jensen on the Azir, and then they counter your invade. And because they have a significantly stronger level 1, you just lose the game off of that. And again, Inspired's on a farming champion, can't do shit on the Wukong. And then, I mean, it's just over, right? Because he can't rush 6. They trade up 3 for 2 kills, but they have much more map pressure and a much better situation. And, the lane swap fails disastrously for FlyQuest. So this was it was 2 very different poor showings in the T1 series, but it just showed that there was no way in 1,000 years that FlyQuest was ever going to beat T1. You play 100 games and T1 probably wins 98 of them.
This is why everyone has to, over the years, update the narratives. But don't do what the fan does, where you update it and then right backwards retcon all of history to always be the current narrative. Don't do that. So one thing I used to do, people might not know, is I have defended Whipple for so many years because, especially when he was in EU, he wasn't the player they all thought he was. By the way, he is that player now, which is someone who's just a fucking liability. He does silly fucking picks that don't work for him. He plays the lane in a mad abusive way, like it was solo queue, and he can just say, go next when he loses, like, even though it's a competitive game. Like, there's a reason why when everyone's going, Inspired just throw everyone under the bus, like, you imagine being a jungler who's a control jungler like him, who wants to play out the game and know where the enemy is and have edges, and you can't ever do it because you're always essentially, the second you start working on your fucking novel, the fucking kids start crying. It's I have to go put him to bed again then. And that's what fucking dealing with Bwipo is like. And the reason I'm sick of this is because, guys, 2018, the year Bwipo was fire on Fnatic and brought into the scene, was 6 years ago now. 6+ years ago now. He's had 6 full years as a pro, and now he's had these massive deals in NA. He's on the super team in Team Liquid. He's on this FlyQuest squad now, and of these teams he's on, he should be one of the most guaranteed best players. He's like a mega veteran. He's been in Worlds a bunch of times. He's been in elite teams in Europe. He's actually,
been in Worlds finals.
This is a guy who's in a position now where he should be like the player you can rely on. And I always used to say before, because usually they even used to compose teams around this way, you'd have like the Reckless or an upset type ADC who's a star. You'd have the mid laner who's a stud who can do all sorts. And so then he could have this sort of like janky play style where he can feed or he can fucking carry, and he would play out his weird LS 20-minute theory sessions out in the game, and he had a different vision on laning. That was all great, right? But mate, this last year or so especially, like, it's become diminishing returns with this player, because the joke of FlyQuest is this conversation should have only been about the bot lane and what was FlyQuest management doing. But if you look at the others, like, I agree, the Bwipo one's the most egregious one, mate, because in all the bad games, he's always part of it. He's always one of the central villains in the bad games.
Well, I also think, like, I mean, we got to see the duality of Bwipo in the 2 series against PSG, because in games 2 and 3 of the first best of 3, I thought Bwipo was quite good. We got to see why this Urgot pick. I mean, he is an Urgot specialist. He always has been. It's now in the meta. And he did great things. Like, I think the R5 Olaf pick was really good for him, and we had seen that before, but Team Liquid dealt with it very effectively in the last game of the LCS finals, and he got zoned out repeatedly by Impact. And FlyQuest, again, their team play in that final was very far below average, so he never got a chance to show it. But in this game, he took over, and so he can take over games. We know that. The thing is that he's not reliable in his decision making. Like he will dominate games, but he will also make fundamental mistakes that he knows he shouldn't make. Like what happened when he TP'd back in versus T1. So he will simultaneously play a very high level game at times, and then he will just make the worst decisions at other times. And honestly, I think that the Bwipo inspired
it doesn't work.
The duo is kind of like a recipe for disaster.
If anything, he should be with like fucking Blabber or something, mate, and let's just go ham and top. Let's just go crazy. Like he can't. How can Inspired play his controlled style if he doesn't know what you're going to do?
Well,
how can you plan?
They also enable each other in weird ways. So if you look at game 2 of the second series between FlyQuest and PSG Talon, which is when they tried that tower dive in the top lane versus Aji's Rumble, and then just gave 2 kills to Maple's Aurelion Soul and used both their flashes. Like, this is such a stinker of a play. And they over pursue, running around after this fucking Rumble. Then they just waltz into the enemy jungle. And of course, Aurelion Soul just flies over, ults them, and gets a double kill. And it's like, now, okay, this, your tournament life is on the line, and you are making dipshit plays. And it's like they get so desperate, and their desperation like appears to like feed off each other, so that they just go way too deep. I mean, the whole story of the second best of 3 was these were winnable positions for FlyQuest,
sure.
And they would just run into the enemy. They would get an advantage and then immediately throw it away and trade down. It was crazy to watch. Like I expected so much better from this team.
No,
and Inspired was a big part of that. I mean, it just felt like they had been broken mentally by the T1 loss, which I don't know why you would be, because you expect to lose that series. And yes, like I said, it was really embarrassing in the way that you lost. You lost worse than you should have, but you should have lost. But you already beat PSG. How can you be coming in with a bad mentality? But it just seemed like they were not there mentally on the day.
That's also, by the way, where even though it may end up being that maybe it's just a particular combination of this top side that doesn't work. Bros, all those players now are real veteran. Even Inspired is a veteran, guys. He was popping up in 2019. It's only a year after Bwipo. Like, these guys, Bwipo, Jensen, and fucking Inspired, they've even been to a gang of international tournaments. They aren't rookies. I can give the bot lane a pass on some level, even though I thought the spot's fucking shit. He shouldn't even be there, but okay, right? The difference is the top side. Like, there is no excuse for that, by the way. There's a concept in Counter-Strike that I have made so much fucking analytical cachet off of Monty, which is all my fellow analysts just ride the fucking momentum train, which I despise as a concept, because it's a psychological concept, you fucking idiot. It's not a real tangible thing. So what I always say is this: what they do is they cast scores like this. Well, and after that, FlyQuest down after the first game. We'll see if they can bounce back. It's going to be hard, though, the way they were beaten. And I always go, yeah, but that's actually the way you know if someone's a top team or just a decent team, because a decent team will just take the same emotional state into the next game. And in Counter-Strike, by the way, the games aren't on the same map. Like in this scenario, you're going to be playing a different set of variables. So famously in Counter-Strike, maybe you did get battered on the first one. Maybe that was their map pick, though. Whereas in, like, it's coming to your map pick now. So the great teams, like if you ever watch FaZe Clan play, they do this all the time. They just do a full reset between maps. By the way, win or lose. Even if they win, they do the reset and come back down, and then you build up again the second map. So the idea these veterans are like, one, carrying the T1 series baggage when they're playing another match. And then two, you've already beaten PSG. If you don't go into that thinking like, by the way, this is why actually I thought it was Corpium when in the interview, Jensen was sort of like, maybe we just like, looked past them or ahead of them. That's not what top teams do. Top teams, what's brilliant, think about T1. Did they look past you, motherfucker? No, what they did is treated you, even though they shouldn't, like a real opponent and just fucking destroyed you, like, methodically. And by the way, even potentially did fuck around the draft, but by the way, they did that so they could just never lose. Like, even if you'd have gotten the early lead, they would have scaled out and just won anyway, wouldn't they? So, actually, I take that almost as a sign of respect from them, that they didn't just go like, lol, just draft the early game comp, just fucking flip the coin. They said, no, you know what, we'll make sure we win this game. So, that's where actually that excuse doesn't fly for me. You know what I mean? Obviously, pun intended. So I think, yeah, they've got to level this up, because this was actually like fucking very underwhelming. I mean, as you said, even though they got away with it, they could have lost that first series too. They could have lost to PSG in the opener.
I'm just surprised, because I thought the in-series adaptations were so good from FlyQuest, and they fixed up almost all of the problems they had in game 1 to win game 2 and 3. And it looked like they had gotten into their groove. But I mean, it's not like PSG is some sort of unbeatable opponent either, right? I mean, sure, Maple's a legend, right? Gen.G has had a lot of success in the past, but I mean, basically Riot has gone out of their way to gimp this region as much as possible to make sure that nobody, I mean, these players on PSG are probably paid 1/4 what the FlyQuest players are paid, maybe, right? And yeah, sure, they're the first seed from PCS, but Riot has basically hollowed out the Taiwanese region, taken away their league, combined it with other regions in the playoffs so that, you know, now, sure, it's harder to get to Worlds for them because now they have to go through Japan and Oceania, right? As the path there, and only one team gets that slot. But basically, Riot has given LCS every single advantage. Oh, you get 2 seeds at MSI as well because you are a major region, right? When they expanded, that's not just your first seed anymore. Just like Korea and LP and China, you get 2. So runner-up from the finals, you get to also go. But you know, that has come at the cost of taking basically everything away from these minor regions, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But as a result, with the amount of money that you are paid and the performance that you are expected to deliver, you can't be losing to PCS. Like, we can talk about the legacy of Taiwan and how there actually are good players here, they're underrated, etc. But you can't lose this game. You can't. You have every single advantage going in, and it's your fault that you lose it. And, you know, obviously your organization has much more money than fucking, you know, any team from Taiwan does at this point in time. Like, the PSG name is one thing, but I don't think they're providing a war chest, right? This is a simple brand share for PSG. And, you know, that's it. So
there's a legendary saying, though, that comes from football, and it's from like the visionary. He was a great player, but he's also a genius, like coach, if people don't know, called Johan Cruyff, who was a Dutch player, right? Who he had a great quote he had when he was a manager. He said, "I've never seen a bag of money score a goal." That's the problem people like FlyQuest have. They think, well, yeah, you're right, Monty. We're on the big salaries and we're from the big boy LCS. And hey, like, and it's like, yeah, but you know what? You have to actually be able to perform in the server. Like, if you can't do it in the server, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter if he gets paid one fucking, I'd say shilling, but you don't know what that is. It's not very much money, and you're fucking a king. In the game, it's the ultimate equalizer, isn't it? That's one of the best things about the fucking game. So I think it's just pathetic, really.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate.
By the way, shout out, the one thing I do appreciate about Reginald at the end is at least he had the good grace, after doing all that evil and ill to the game of League of Legends, to actually just sort of like do a little whip around and raise a few million for true legends like Sword Art and Maple and just pay him a bunch of money on the way out. So now they have that little fucking nest egg. So it doesn't matter now if they play in the little regions, you know, with the old boys, they get to have their millions too. Fair enough, Reginald. I mean, I will say, if you're Bjergsen, you're a little bit salty you didn't get the millions, aren't you? But you know what? At least some players who internationally performed did, Bjergsen. So I did do my shitty little tweet, Monty, which is a banger, because it's not a lie. I never lie, Monty, which is that Maple is still the most internationally decorated player to ever play mid lane for TSM. There you go. That one sticks right in the craw, doesn't it? But it's true. It is true, though. It is true.
That's amazing.
I love that one. It's too good, isn't it? It's too good. It's too good.
I mean, Bjergsen did get his millions. He just took them from Team Liquid and ran it down. So, and didn't even make it international competition, which is worse. But look, you know, it sucks because as far as FlyQuest is concerned, like, it's good to see a team that wants to spend. You know, everyone else is cutting their costs, and like FlyQuest wants to be here.
The ambition, yeah.
Yeah, the ambition is there. So it's just disappointing that last year we had this hot start followed by the fucking car crash, right, of Prince and Vikla. And now this year we get what should be a hyped up roster that should have been, you know, competing with Cloud9 at the top, and like should have, you know, we knew the bot lane was going to be a little bit shaky. We didn't know that Busio was going to completely and utterly devastatingly choke under any kind of pressure. But, you know, it's a risk you have with all kind of young players who are up and coming. Maybe he'll get over it. Probably won't. If I had to guess, that's not like his level of choking is not something that I normally see pro players like work past. You know, there's different kinds of choking, right? We could talk about Chovy. Okay, so here's the example. Chovy 2022 Worlds, when he forgot that he could play side lanes and he like reverted back to his old play style. The thing is, his old play style was still good. That's the thing. It wasn't complete in a macro sense, but in the Chovy vacuum, he was still doing well by himself. He just couldn't play the map, and that inhibited his team style because his team style was predicated on him being in a side lane and creating pressure. So, he did fuck up his team. The thing about Busio is that his level of choking is so bad that he gets into a final and he literally can't push buttons. Like, that is next level. Like, he will be in a team fight and use like one ability and then die. Or he'll miss everything. And Chovy wasn't missing things. He wasn't the complete player that he's become now. Right. He kind of went back to his former self, but even as a rookie, he was that player and he was, really good as a rookie, still a top player in the world. So Busio, I think overcoming whatever is going on is going to be extremely, extremely difficult for him. And I also think, frankly, that the team is asking way too much of him. Like, all of a sudden, he's playing support Rumble in the finals. Now he's playing fucking support Nico in their do or die game. Like, he's not Keria, guys. That ain't who he is. Like, you're expecting this giant champion pool out of this guy playing these, quite different picks. And what do you expect is going to happen? Like, you need to return to comfort for this. His Renata Glask is probably one of his better champions. So he did get a hold of that. But I do think it's weird that all of a sudden we have like the Rumble and the Nico coming in. He's played one game of Rumble, which was fucking terrible, probably his worst game of all time. And then it's a second game of Nico on your elimination game.
I also do hate that, and I always will, where it's like, I've been watching Keria play Nico and Life play Rumble. It's like, leave it there, though. Just watch them and then close the screen down and realize you're not them.
Well, but I mean, that's the team's decision, right? Is to put him in these situations. It's weird. It's weird. So like, I just don't understand with this guy who's struggling. He played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different champions this spring between Spring Split and MSI.
Champion Ocean. It's just that this ocean, I guess it's full of toxic waste or something, isn't it? Which isn't very on brand FlyQuest. Come on. Clean up my oil spill.
It's just microplastics everywhere. It's just the Pacific trash patch.
Because I'm just thinking to myself, like, it's not like you abandon hope on the team. There's still talent. You can do a lot in the summer. You could fix this and come back to Worlds, but it's like
I even agree with the premise. I mean, I agree with the premise of Busio's development, which was that he was a mid laner, and mid lane is always going to be basically an import position, and North American mid laners are few and far between. He wasn't Jojo Pion, right? And so it makes sense to switch to support. But if you are going to utterly and devastatingly choke in domestic playoffs and in international competition, what value do you have? Like, you might as well just take a flyer on anybody else at that point in time, because it doesn't matter how good your regular season is. And it's not like it's not like the dichotomy was so crazy. It's not like, oh my God, this guy is fucking hard carrying these games from the support position. And then all of a sudden he turns into a pumpkin. He was like, okay. And then actively a saboteur within the team. And so if you can get another okay support, at least you would have possibly some knowledge that they would be okay in pressure situations, right? So I think you really have to believe that Busio is going to somehow 180 his mentality, which I think is really unlikely, because it doesn't happen that way. Like, I mean, Thorin, you know the history of esports. Have you seen a player just like completely, shift and something where they choke really badly and then come around?
The joke is only if they're the greatest players of all time in the end. Like, you have to be like, you have to be Chovy, you have to be Device. If you do it, that player can do it. But you notice I'm also picking people with prodigious talents who are automatically outliers to the equation. People who have these sorts of problems. The reason why I always said to people, it's only when you're a mega talent I'm going to put up with the choking angle. It's because if you're not, then what upside do I have anyway? And then secondly, I can't fix that. Like, by the way, even the angle, like, just get a sports psychologist. They're not fucking miracle workers. They don't walk in like
right.
They don't walk in like Jesus and just heal you. Like, oh, he touched me and the power came into me, and now I'm Lord, I am healed. I can see. Like, they sit you down and say stuff like, when you're in a pressure situation, you know, how do you feel? And, you know, let's do an anchor exercise. That works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. So as a result, it's like I've always said, problems of the mind are absolutely above the pay grade of anyone in fucking esports teams. Like, even though I don't want to sound too Korean in this regard, just get someone else. There'll be a guy out there who's got the same skills who isn't choking. Just get him. Because like I said, notice that'd be different, Monty, if you had simple or device or something like that. Because you can't just get someone else like that. It's worth the downside to see if they can figure it out. In this particular scenario, he's not that good anyway, mate. You just go and get someone else.
What I'm saying.
You think about how many people can play support. Even that angle of like, yeah, he's control. Brilliant. You know what, Monty? He can go and explore that little fucking narrative on Dignitas as long as he wants. And while he's doing that, if he ever gets good, I'll pay attention. But if you want to be on a top team with the top side of the map they have, you've got to be competent today. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think that's the issue is like, you know, how long is the experiment going to go on for FlyQuest? I think Masu is a real talent. Like, I think Masu
the saddest
could be
thing is, you notice we didn't mention him fucking up a single thing in this conversation.
I mean, he looks great in the first series
of all,
versus PSG.
He is easily one of the best the difference is he could be a Jojo Pion of fucking ADC, Monty. He actually has real talent, and considering he is essentially handicapped in this team, he actually held up fairly well. Like, he did the best he could. So the saddest thing is I'm also thinking of him, which is as much as you want to be kind to Busu. I don't, but some people will be. Well, why are you being unkind to Matsu then, you dick? That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to flip it that way whenever people say that. Like, why you hate on this point? No, why are you hating on the guy you make stay in prison? Bad teammate.
And what is you know, is Busio offering certain intangibles? Like, he was the more veteran player with a year of professional experience, and yet there were still tons of whoopsies in the bot lane in spring. Is he bringing shot calling? If he is, nobody's fucking listening to him because FlyQuest late game macro has been trash. And like, frankly, I mean, this is the problem you run into with super veterans. Why would inspired Jensen and Bwipo listen to Busio? Which could be a problem. Maybe Busio's in there making all the right calls, in which case you have to replace the veteran players and try and go with a younger roster that will listen to Busio's good shot calls if he's being very effective in comms. Like, I can't know that. But this roster is just busted. And especially if Cloud9 gets any of their shit together whatsoever, like, you're basically praying that all of the other teams don't have any improvement, because I think the upside for this iteration of FlyQuest, like, their ceiling is just really low, in my opinion now. Having watched them play this much, they're just so disappointing.
I'll tell you why that's so criminal as well. Shameless plug is I actually just did a series on my Substack, IamEsports.substack, where I actually looked at like players who did really well against international Asian competition in these massive tournaments. And the first part I made free, and then the second part you have to pay for. And in the first part, here's what will shock you, especially people who read the whole thing, right? If I say this statement right now, it's actually going to melt some people's brains. So even though, yes, Jensen has played for a couple more years in League of Legends than Caps, I'm going to tell you straight up, and this is going to trigger the fuck out of you, but investigate history. Jensen has carried more games against the best Asian players than Caps has. And already your brain just says, it can't be Thorin. But here's what you don't know, guys. Season 8 Worlds, the one where Caps went to the final with Fnatic, he actually was fairly shit in those playoffs. You can go watch them. He didn't even carry against EDG. He was shit in the bed. Against C9, it was mainly the top side of the map. In the finals, everyone shit in the bed. Like, Jensen has had almost every tournament except this one, ironically. Every tournament except this one internationally, he has a minimum of one game where he goes off against a BDD, a Faker, or whatever. And if you go back some of the past years, he's having like 4 or 5 games at these ones. Actually, one of the things I always thought was so interesting, but no one had the talent on that broadcast in LCS to actually sell this angle, is what made him and Bjergsen interesting is they have the opposite careers. Bjergsen had all the domestic success and a little smidgen when it came to the international, and it took Jensen until 2022 to even get his 3rd LCS title, but he had loads of international performances that were like really good, or he'd match up, or you'd think he shouldn't be able to do anything, but he'd find like he'd get onto his Oriana, or he'd have some pick that'd fucking work, or get a LeBlanc game going. Like, it's actually mad underrated. So the saddest thing about this squad was, that's one of the reasons I was hyped. I thought, like, if this squad can actually perform, here's someone who can just roll back the years for one game. All I need is one game. If you just give me one game where you get him onto the LeBlanc game and he has to pop off, that's what you always hope for, because you're not really thinking like spoiler, if they were in PSG's spot and they'd made it now, they would get their arse ploughed by BLG. No one's thinking they could win the series. That's not even plausible. But at least give me like, that one game where the draft goes in your head, or they get cocky in the draft and it'll be your fight. That's where you're going to get, that's what you have to settle for if you're a Western fan at this point in time. There's G2 and then the rest is just, can Humanoid have one pop-off game? Can I get one pop-off game from Jensen? Can Bwipo have one lane where he actually fucking like puts a player like Jace down and then suddenly he runs all over? That's what you got to hope for at this point.
Yeah. And it's just very unlikely to happen. It's super unlikely to happen in a best of series repeatedly, I think is the issue. Yeah, but this FlyQuest run was, I mean, even for a second place team that was very flawed in the LCS playoffs, I think this was just such a super disappointing way. I mean, the bop by T1 into the inexplicably bad performance versus PSG in the second best of 3. I mean, it just leaves you with a very bitter taste in your mouth about FlyQuest as a roster. And like, I just don't think this roster can be functional. I mean, based on what we've seen, it's just like when it's good, when it's working well, it is not good enough. And when it's not working, which is most of the time, it looks absolute trash. So what's the point in maintaining these players is my question.
Shout out to the guy in chat who, as usual, did the thing where they actually tell you factually you're wrong and then use the wrong facts. So when I said Jensen competed internationally against the best Asians, and then you go, well, actually did pretty well against C9. It's like, well, that's somewhat irrelevant then, isn't it? Because they're all fucking Asian, although they try their best. So they try their best.
They're no Team Liquid, all Korean roster, but they're trying.
I'll give them that. I know by proxy they sort of are, but obviously I was talking about the elite teams, wasn't
I? So Thorin, there was just the announcement, this is fun, of the club support program at the Esports World Cup. So they, during this show, announced the teams that we were discussing earlier. So here you go. So for those of you who don't know, basically, so they've actually expanded it to 30 teams when it was supposed to be 28 at first. So basically what happened is the Saudis picked 22 teams worldwide who are going to be basically their partner teams. And then they started fielding applications for the remainder. So they got 8 more teams via applications. And effectively what happens is that they will receive one-time cash payments as part of this partnership program, and they can increase that amount of money. Like the amount of money is a sliding scale based off of kind of engagement, the number of, basically like the number of titles they're competing in. And as we've stated previously, they get the bounty program for competing in the Esports World Cup across titles, which is why you have been seeing, this, big difference between which rosters teams have as they kind of like build. It's like Team Liquid suddenly back at Apex Legends. I wonder why. Vitality, whoa, now they're in StarCraft 2. That's weird. That's kind of a game with not a lot of popularity. Well, turns out it's at the Esports World Cup. And basically, the better you do across the board, so if a team gets high placements across all of the competitions that are in the Esports World Cup, the team gets millions of dollars as a result. So the partner teams,
this is so cynically drawn, though. This is literally, like you said, just for reach reasons. Because I'll give you obvious examples.
Guild?
Like, at least they're like decent in Valorant, but yeah, they obviously have nothing else anywhere. They're irrelevant. Like their team encounters like shit. Carmine Corp, that's a complete disgrace. That's just beyond. That's just because you got the fans. There's the obvious ones is LGD's there. Not all those massive orgs in China. LGD haven't been relevant for years and years and years, guys. Koi is just there because of Ibai. They're not
Space
good in
Station Gaming. Like what?
I mean, like, if people don't know, at least the Gaming Gladiators has like a very good Dota 2 team. I'd give them that, but some of these Tundra similar, some of these are just whack. Yeah. I mean, what universe is NIP good in? Like they're vaguely good in League, I guess. That's it. That's all they've got.
And then, of course, they have the Saudi teams like Falcons and Twisted Minds, right? So that they actually have some domestic ownership as well.
Well, the thing about that, Monty, is, and this is what you'll love, even though the owner guy of Falcons came on HLTV Confirmed podcast and was asked questions about, like, you know, what, and he tried to sort of like, in a measly mouthed way, he tried to imply they're not owned by the PIF, but then they sort of tried to ask something like, yeah, but, you know, through like a sponsorship, do you have any sort of ties? And he just sort of like dizzled his way out of it. So it's even implied, Monty, just like they're kind of doing in other sports, that like everyone who's from that region's just somehow getting money through this program, at least until the irony of ironies is, here's another thing people won't know, Monty. There wasn't that long ago, they just announced that actually they're going to pivot away from this type of esports and into mobile gaming. So the best thing is, guys, you know, all those gay people you all supported and stood for, and how you sold them all down the river in exchange for the blood money. It's not even that big a bag of blood money in the end, just one little bag. Have your little bag and then fuck off. It's like me in the club back in the day. Straight fire reference.
I mean, they've said that they're not going to do any more esports acquisitions through Savvy Gaming, which is the parent company, which means that they're not going to buy Blast, or they're not going to
exactly
do these things, but they're still going to fund the Esports World Cup, and they're still going to continue with these programs.
No, but the implication was, because this is the way they were heading before,
the big bag ain't coming anymore.
Just buy everything in esports. They're going to buy the whole scene up. And by the way, like always, all the OGs love that. They all want to cash out, guys. They always have. They want to cash out when LCS spot's worth $1 million. They want to cash out when it was CGS. They want to cash out now, and they want to cash out when it was investment. So that's the hilarious part. And also, if you don't get it, the funniest part of all is, if you're an esports fan, you're going to go, mobile gaming. The joke is, idiots, real esports never went anywhere. Like, let me just ask you the question, the rhetorical question, but you can answer it to your screen if you want. How much money did you spend this year on tickets and passes for esports? Now, after answering that question, I'll tell you why you want mobile, because it's actually the reason people explained to me years ago why CDL's a way better prospect than fucking Overwatch League was, because the goal one day is that there'll be COD games that people just play on their phone, just like we used to see people play those dungeon crawls on fucking Korean subways where you just do it on your commute. And the premise goes, you can have a way bigger audience with the mobile game. And so as a result, like, that is seen as the bigger pivot, as long as it's still all about eyeballs.
It's also just like gotcha games, or, you know, exploitative monetary transactions. I mean, you make a lot of money off of mobile games. So here's one. Savvy Gaming actually bought, you know, if not all of, a majority stake in Monopoly Go. Then which
supposedly makes tons of money, by the way. It's not even a joke.
That's tons of money.
Like a license to print money, apparently.
I mean, it's the same shit that happened with Activision Blizzard when they bought King, which makes Candy Crush. It turns out, you know, a lot of those earning calls, you know, Candy Crush was like the most popular and profitable game in the Activision Blizzard portfolio, including Call of Duty, that was selling for $60 a pop, because people spend outrageous sums on microtransactions within these games. So it makes sense, right? It's not even just like, it's not about mobile competition. It's just about microtransaction in shitty mobile games. But considering the profits that are there, it's lucrative.
I have a question. I don't even know who Blacklist International is. Who is that?
They're a Southeast Asian team.
What games are they in? Never heard
of them. I think.
I don't remember seeing this team, but okay.
But also, I'm looking them up right now. They're in Mobile Legends and Wild Rift and PUBG. So probably there are a lot of mobile games that are going to be played at the Esports World Cup, including PUBG.
This isn't a top team. That's why. Okay, right, fair enough.
I mean, they might be in mobile esports, but mobile esports have a big presence at Esports World Cup. Like I said, they're doing Mobile Legends.
Right, it's a team from Philippines. Okay, right.
Yeah, they're doing PUBG Mobile as well. So some of these other mobile teams are probably in here that we're less familiar with. So like, yeah, I think, you know, especially Mobile Legends is huge as a game, and with them pivoting it, like you say, into mobile gaming, I don't think competitive mobile is really where it's at. But, you know, if you want to do that, then you're going to have to bring in teams. And I think Blacklist International is big in that community. So,
by the way, fun fact, guys out there, you know, when they do those awards that you morons all go, yeah, it's great, Faker should be PC Player of the Year. Some of the people who get to vote whether Faker wins it or Ziwu are dickheads who just cast mobile games. That's real. They get a vote. So if Monty votes, he was not on the panel anymore, but if Monty was there and he voted like Chovy, then those two wankers who don't even follow league can go, I've heard Fakers, the go to vote Faker, and it counteracts Monty's vote completely. So brilliant awards stuff. Great system they've got going there. Yeah, it's good. It's good shit. Good shit. By the way, speaking of which, another plug for the Substack. I've done what I always promised we would do, Monty, which is I always told you that I would actually I would tell these fucking kids why they don't know that Faker is nowhere close to his peak. I did a piece called The Real Faker, where I just go through what it was actually like when Faker was cracked and what he actually could do on his champions and how he would dominate the game and the different many feats he had. And once you really set your mind back and you relive it all, you realize it's not even close now. Like, it's a different player now even. Like I say, this is old man Faker. This is like the thing where you're trying to sort of actually steal titles from the up-and-comers, from the Knights and the Chovies of the world. You're not ever getting close to your peak. Like, I saw a fan say something that just made me actually just think, I'm not going to engage with the public anymore. I'm a complete elitist. I am going to live forever in Elysium or an ivory tower. Because they said to me, yeah, but you could make an argument he's still top 5, which counts for his GOAT case. Right. So by being top 5, that makes him still the greatest player ever. How would that make sense? Greatest player has to include a component, which is if you could bring them all in a time machine and have them play, your guy would win. So how would being top 5 help? How would that help? What you're telling me is but are you ready? This is some insane logic, Monty. So because he's not the best now, that makes him even more the best ever. This is where LeBron has actually ruined all your brains, because what he tried to teach you was, if I just play more years than everyone, then on aggregate, don't I get to be the greatest? It's like, no, LeBron, because as I just said, at no point in that time frame would you ever have been the best basketball player. So spoiler, you're not, checks notes, the best basketball player ever. I'm glad I solved that for you really quickly. There we go. Good one.
Well, here, Thorin, this is a perfect segue, because if you want to drown out the comments of people who don't think about, perhaps the real legacy of Faker, and you have to listen to their yapping all of the time, well, our sponsor here on Summoning Insight, Raycon, has a new feature for you, which is active noise cancellation on their latest iteration of their everyday earbuds, which I got to try. So block out all of that annoying noise. I recently flew from Korea back to the States. I was using these. And for earbuds, the active noise cancellation works really well on planes. I will tell you that.
Sealing your ear and all that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, now they have the active noise cancellation. It's a new feature. Raycon's always iterating on their headphones and the earbuds. So this newest model, if you guys haven't gotten any yet, is great. It's especially good because the price point that you get these at is crazy good for active noise cancellation. They also added new quick charge functionality. So that's awesome. Come in a variety of colors. And as you've said, Thorin, it's very easy to tap up, tap down volume, have those features also. So been really enjoying mine, especially on my travels, super portable. The case charges like a lot of earbuds do. So you charge the case, it charges the earbuds. Now they have that quick charge feature as well. So it's been really good for me. Great for the gym too. They are water resistant, so you don't have to worry about sweating. It's been really nice. So I really appreciated having them on my latest international flight, especially with that new noise cancellation feature. So if you guys want to get them, you can go to buyraycon.com/LFN today to get 20% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right. You'll get 20% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/LFN. Buyraycon.com/LFN. Just eliminate the noise of all the people saying the things that are absolutely outrageous. Live in your own ivory tower, wherever you are.
And then you can just listen to Summoning Insight while you're out and about and doing stuff.
There you go. Listen to our opinions, which are less annoying. Yeah. Speaking of Faker, I wanted to get your take on this, Thorin. So there was a leak recently about something that is almost certainly going to be announced at MSI. And that is that, remember how
Hall of Fame or something, right?
Remember the Hall of Legends that Riot announced earlier this year, and how Faker magically pivoted away from Ahri to Orianna after Worlds for his skin? and Faker implied in interviews that the Ahri skin would be coming. Well, it turns out that Faker is going to be the first inductee into the Hall of Legends by Riot. They're making it themselves. They're going to do some, looks like they're creating an animation from the leaked stuff that has come out already of Faker, and they're going to be releasing an Ahri skin. Now, as the esports historian, how do you feel about celebrating Faker's career while it's still going?
I mean, the problem with that is I just know that esports is a cynical business venture. So the reason they want to do it now is because this is when it's most likely people will buy the skin while he's still playing, right? But obviously, every single sport that I know of doesn't allow you, except I think maybe the UFC might, but it's not really a traditional sport, is it? It's like literally prize fighting, guys. Every other sport requires you to be retired to do all these things. Like, look, they will if you're like Michael Jordan, forego the like 5-year waiting period for the NBA, but you still have to retire before you go in the Hall of Fame. Like, that is actually mad. Not late. And also, by the way, not only is it kind of like very cynically done, but I'll just say this. Obviously, everyone can get the first one right? You can get fucking Faker. Maybe you do like Heaton and Counter-Strike. The problem here is this, Monty. Immediately, I'm ready to just be triggered.
You know what I'm coming, baby.
Oh, that would be way worse, mate. I'm already thinking like Bengi, Beryl, like, you know what I mean? I'm thinking some fucking utter cretins are coming next as the next ones. Like, sadly, it won't be like what it should be, Deft, Rookie. Like, if you're going to keep doing Faker, then start with these names too. Like, these should be the first ballot, right?
Yeah. And also, how are you going to create like an in-game event potentially, or a super special skin for everyone? Like, you've set the bar so high. It also doesn't really solve. I mean, it's great for the players. I'm sure the players are going to individually get cuts for this and they're going to be quite happy, but it doesn't solve the current, you spent all this effort basically, but it doesn't solve the current problems with the esports winter or the teams who are, it doesn't help the teams. Right. So, you basically pulled the plug on the things that were going to help the teams, like the streaming platform that you promised the teams. And instead, you've replaced it with these Hall of Legends honoring players cynically because you want to, if you do it when Faker retires, you don't get as much money potentially. Yeah. Maybe you get that same initial burst of money because if Faker retires, you just do it as his retirement. But the thing is, the longer Faker plays, probably the more money you get out of that skin that you've made, right?
Well, this will be where during like a Worlds match, like in the quarters, as you like have the client open, it'll be like, hey, did you know you could get a Faker skin? Like, oh, fuck right off, right? Even though that is good for making money, it's like, it's so cynical, isn't it? It's so cynical.
It's also just weird. It's also just weird to celebrate a player's career while that career is ongoing. I mean,
obviously, I could put a joke in there, which is like, the real Faker did stop playing about 6 years ago, didn't he? So in that sense, especially, to be fair, he actually was pretty good on Ahri, even in this latter year. It's probably one of his best champions still.
So I don't know. The Ahri skin is obviously going to go crazy as well because Ahri sells skins in general. And there's a lot.
Ahri, no. Probably get them off as well, so it can be used. I don't Riot. They don't give a fuck, mate. They're ridiculous.
But that's what's coming up, guys. And it was interesting to see this get kind of suppressed on social media because even though there are literally screenshots that are being shared of the event that's coming up, of course, it was just completely suppressed for being unsubstantiated, even though there's actual visual evidence included in this that somebody didn't fucking make these elaborate animated screenshots of Faker and then put it on the internet as a fake. Also, we knew that this was coming, and from my own sources, guys, I can verify that this is true. So it's definitely coming. Now, I don't know if it's coming at MSI or not. I suspect it is, but it will be coming sometime soon. Right, they're gonna rush this out, try and print money off of Faker. At least Faker will get some of the money. Not like he needs it, but good for him. But it is the new cynical ploy by Riot to develop money, and they can do this, but it's just absolutely fucking impossible for them to do anything in game to support the teams. Absolutely fucking impossible. Depressing.
It's Riot Games, mate. I learned. Listen, here's the thing. I haven't had hope at Riot Games for like fucking better part of a decade, mate. I know this is coming. It's all good. Remember, beatings will continue until morale improves. It never gets better. What are we talking about? No way.
All right, you want to talk about some of these other teams at MSI, perhaps?
Do it.
Who else did you find compelling at this glorious MSI play-ins?
Well, the obvious hilarious one to me is this. which is the team that had to look. Every social media in esports now is beyond obnoxious, even though actually it doesn't even seem to yield like the insane engagement they hope on their social media team. So obviously Fnatic acted like they were doing some big boy shit by like beating GAM. It's like, you got the easier group, you twat. We even got the actual team of the Asian teams that there was a better chance against. Like TES were always going to give you a game to play. You didn't beat them, even though it was close. And then, by the way, you go down, GAM's way more beatable than PSG. And actually, mate, they almost fucked that up. They did still win, but they gave GAM a few chances in that fucking game too, mate. So like, it's just, what's funny is this is exactly the dichotomy of Fnatic that makes them overrated in the LEC. They can play when they play the top teams and play up to that level and almost beat them, but they can also play against a lower team and just go down in the fucking mud and just get messy with them.
What are you talking about? It's, it's not embarrassing to play close against a team that had their mid and AD carry removed late in the season and had to find emergency substitutes because of a possible match fixing scandal. I mean,
they even sound some of their players sound like the porn parody name. They had a player called Easy Love,
who is a veteran of the Vietnamese scene. So he's
that's like he took Easy Hoon and Jackie Love and he made the porn parody. He said, Easy Love, he's here to fuck bot up. You know what I mean? Give you, will he 1v9? Give me a break.
And he can only play Zeri, which is also funny. I mean, surely Loud, CBLOL champions, would not lose embarrassingly to a team that had substitute players that had an actual league-wide emergency that scuffed the entirety of their region's late season and playoffs and MSI qualifications. Surely that wouldn't happen, right?
Don't you think it's crazy that, like, in League of Legends, Brazil has never been anything, not for one fucking second. Like, it's so mad because if people don't know, in different times in Counter-Strike, they've been really, really good. But what's bizarre is there's been way more money and infrastructure in League of Legends down in Brazil, but they just can never somehow yield the fucking results. Even when, by the way, they've actually had, unironically, like by the way, Crown used to play there. Fucking Ole played there. There's loads of like actual like Koreans have even played
and
there.
And this was before they had, this was before Crown won Worlds. A lot of Korean players who went on to greater success started their careers in Brazil.
I don't know what it is, mate. It's just so bizarre to me that they can never do it internationally. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, especially because they have, at this point in time, I mean, Tin Owens is a decade-long veteran of the scene who has had clutch international performances. And yes, they were a long time ago, but it is confusing that Loud would lose to GAM under the circumstances that GAM is in. Now, if GAM was truly, fielding their top roster and had a normal ass season, maybe not. But under these circumstances, and this is why I think it's so funny that, whenever I tweet, not my opinion, by the way, even though it is my opinion, but I don't tweet it as my opinion. I merely say on social media, I think it is likely that Riot creates an America's League. I do think they should, but I don't say that in the tweet. I get hundreds of tweets back from Brazilians saying, no, we don't want that. Why should we prop up your dying league? Well, motherfucker, because maybe your players would get better if they were playing against better competition more of the time. Is this what you want, Brazilians? You want more viewership, but for you guys to fucking crash against GAM, a Vietnamese team with substitutes? Like, come on.
They don't know what they want, Monty. They're like that fucking meme of the dog that's like, take and throw. No, it's like throw the ball, but don't take. Throw the ball, but don't take. It's like, well, I have to take it and throw it. So, no, the thing is, Monty, that's one of the things where that's actually the sign of a moron, by the way, where the only reason you'd ever say something is because you want it to happen. Right? I can't even enter that mind frame. Like I even got like a big rant ready for you because it's like I feel myself getting stupid to even try and push my brain through that tiny little hole. I can't do it. Like to me, there's a million things we discuss. I mean, an obvious thing would be bad things in the world, things that are terrible, warnings for things that could happen down the line. But to a cretin, if you say it, you want that to happen. It's why I've told you the ultimate way you can tell a fan base is beyond a waste of time is just tweet a fact with no information. I'll give you a great one I've done before, Monty. There's times where, like Ziwu, who people know I think isn't as good as Simple, which remember means I hate him and want him to die in real life. That's what that means. I know you just heard I think he's the second best player ever. No, I hate him and want him to die in real life. That's what that means, translated to their language. Right? When he would have a bad game at a major, I would just tweet something like Ziwu 8 and 13, like his score in the game. And the replies would be like, see, you're just fucking saying he's trash. And see, you think he's not going to be number one. And then it's like, that's all in your brain. None of that's in my... Here's the spoiler. An egghead, right, is someone who's really intelligent, right? You're not. You're a pea-brain guys on Twitter. Like, the idea you can model my mind separately, enter that space and see what I might be thinking. It's not even plausible, mate. Like, maybe just go off what I'm saying, because I'm so bored of that. It's why I told Maui Snake the secret the other day on Snake and Banter, forthcoming. It goes like this. Maui said the same thing when he was pointing out that there's a player in Furia in Counter-Strike that's not doing very well. He kept getting people like, why'd you hate Brazil? Why'd you... And, or someone's like, you're biased against Brazil. I said, here's the answer. You just say to them 3 things. Yeah, I am. So what? And because what you realize is, even if I was biased, even if I hated Brazil, what would that do to my point? Is my point correct or not? Because here's the problem, guys. If you don't say my point is wrong, that means you're just emotionally reacting like cognitive dissonance to what I said. If I was wrong, you'd just say I'm wrong, you daft cunt. You wouldn't say, you're biased. Like, doesn't matter if I'm biased or I'm right, does it? What's that got to do with anything? It's totally irrelevant. And spoiler, that's the reason why, unlike people like Maui, I don't have to dance on a tightrope. By the way, I'm not actually biased against Brazil, but fuck it. Because of them fans I am. So yeah, go on, then I am. Brilliant. What are you going to do about it? Keep fucking taking it. I am biased and I'm right. Brilliant. Best position to be in.
Yeah. So I think Riot will
agree, by the way. They almost certainly would actually get better if they played against all the LCS competition and all the imports. They get way better, yeah.
It would also make LCS better, almost certainly, like the North American teams.
Sure.
Even though I think we did have just now one of the more competitive LCS splits in that the bot teams weren't complete dog shit. A lot of people don't want to mention this, but a lot of the reasons why this split was so competitive is because we had giga underperformers like Cloud9 and FlyQuest within this league who massively didn't live up to their potential. Had those teams lived up to their potential, you think we would have seen the parity in LCS? In fact, the parity was kind of a bad sign in many ways, because the parity certainly didn't do anything for LCS at international. Like, if you honestly believe that somehow Team Liquid has a snowball's chance in hell against top esports, like, the probable path for Team Liquid is that they get completely bopped by top esports and then Fnatic crushes them out of the tournament. They lose in 2 best-of-5s and that's it. That's the end of their run. LCS is dead. Like, that's the most probable thing that's going to happen. Maybe they can beat Fnatic. I don't think Fnatic has a huge edge over them, but I would say Fnatic is probably the favorite based on what we've seen so far. So, I mean, I think both LCS and CBLOL fans should be looking for anything that might increase the competitiveness and viewership of this region, because it's the only way to save it. Otherwise, it is in the death spiral. It is. International results are shit. That makes people not care about watching the leagues. The leagues are, well, CBLOL isn't, but LCS is down hugely in terms of viewership. But CBLOL's viewership isn't saving them from, not being competitive and an incredibly embarrassing result. So what's the downside, really? I don't think if they combine it that fewer Brazilians are going to watch. Probably more will, because they're going to be excited about Brazilian teams versus North American teams. It's worked for Valorant. Like,
and also, spoiler, like, we could also just save you all this time, Brazilians. We just won't talk about your region or LCS anymore. There you go. See ya. You can all just go down the toilet together and we'll just focus. Here's what you don't get, guys. This has happened in other games. There's other games where regions died off. I just watched the dominant region. I don't give a fuck. By the way, when League at the end is just China and a bit of Korea, I'll keep watching that. You guys can fuck off to Valorant 2 or whatever you're into then. I don't give a monkeys, mate. I'll keep watching the best league.
Right. And the thing is, the hardcore fans of League of Legends have pretty much all moved over to Asian regions at this point in time, and it hasn't really hurt our viewership. And the fans are still highly engaged in those regions. They just are elitist now, which is wonderful. I mean, this is the end game for esports, where there's enough people to sustain the esport and you get the elite, you still get the elite competition. But, I'm not going to cry if LCS dies and then all of a sudden I have to have the 3rd seeds at LCK and LPL at MSI instead of 2 at NA teams. You think that's going to hurt me? It won't. It's going to be great.
And we've changed our monetization model. I don't need to have 200k views on a VOD. I just need 5 people to go, Raycon headphones, they sound good, and then order them and get 20% off and free shipping with the code.
Exactly. And supporting our sponsors is great, guys. So, and if you're thirsty for more LFN sponsors, you can quench that thirst, obviously, with Liquid IV, one of our favorite sponsors that we've had ever on the show. Liquid IV has been absolutely wonderful in terms of their support. So thank you very much. As you guys know, you can get it at Costco nationwide in the United States of America, should you so choose. Or you can head on over to their website and buy it directly. But with summer coming up, you probably need a few more electrolytes in your system. And Liquid IV has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. It's great. I'm back in the States now. Got myself a giant box of Liquid IV to take back to Korea because I use it every single time I work out. It's been awesome. Now they have sugar-free options as well. How do you enjoy Liquid IV, Thorin?
I think it's pretty good. I actually just drank one earlier. I can't show you now. I've already drank it. It was an hour ago. But one of the things I do is actually when I do shows, this is another angle people won't realize, because I have to talk a lot for my job. Obviously, you have to drink water or some sort of fluid. But the problem is, if you only drink tap water, you actually will just dehydrate yourself eventually because it'll strip out all the electrolytes. And so actually, eventually, essentially, if you don't know how it works, like the water can't get through or there's too much, etc. Like, so the electrolytes balance it out. So what I do is in between like the 3 or 4 that I have to drink of water a day, I'll do one Liquid IV to sort of like balance me out again. I feel way better. I don't feel as like just destroyed as I normally do otherwise.
Yeah, and a lot of you are going to be outside hiking during the summer, going to music festivals, going to the beach, traveling, obviously great on planes as well. I slammed one after my international trip that I just came back to the States with. So many applications for Liquid IV, which is great. So go ahead and pick some up, and you can turn your ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code LFN at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code LFN at liquidiv.com. So we know you guys like it. A lot of you have on our Discord server been giving positive feedback to many of our sponsors in our new sponsor feedback channel, which has been awesome. Many of you love Liquid IV. We do too. And supporting our sponsors is the best way to support us here at Last Free Nation. So thanks a lot. It's great stuff. So enjoy your Liquid IV this summer. Now is a perfect time to pick it up as things get hotter. You sweat more, lose those electrolytes, replace them with Liquid IV. So thank you very much. Thorin, do you have thoughts on Fnatic and their performance so far? Like you said, obviously they've been in the easier group. Humanoids had some really pop-off games, which have been fun to watch. Jun continues to be super good, like his hot streak that started in the LEC playoffs. That guy's stepping up in a really big way. I mean, we questioned, why are we getting this Jun guy on Fnatic and letting Trimby go? Well, turns out he's had some really solid performances. He's starting to live up to, the expectation of a Trimby replacement potentially.
The problem is, obviously, they've got a nightmare fuel draw. Like, not only did they draw Gen.G, an actual tournament favourite, but if you look at, like, of all the teams you could have picked, I think they would have rather had BLG. They'd have rather had the other tournament favourite. That would be like a game you could fight in. I think Gen.G is just going to methodically destroy them. So for me, it's mainly about, like I said, can I get that one humanoid pop-off game? Can I have one where he gets ahead, gets some kills as a champion that has agency in the meta? Then it's more for Fnatic about what happens in the lower bracket, because I don't think there's a world they can beat Gen.G, mate. I don't know how you can even conceive of it.
Well, I think, the humanoid pop-off games were also predicated on a very interesting, like, Cream international choke. We said, beware of Cream. Like, he's been good. He's an up-and-coming star. He's a rising star. But Top Esports wasn't really a serious contender for the title because it's simply the fact that Cream was going to have to run the gauntlet of Faker, Chovy, and Knight in order to win some sort of, MSI title. So especially in double elimination, especially when he was an unknown factor. But he shows up and he plays pretty miserably on one of his signature champions in Ahri. He was missing tons of skill shots, as you guys saw. So, he was choking. He was choking in that series versus Fnatic. Now, Top Esports still managed to win. But now Humanoid has to go up against against Chovy. If he played BLG, he'd have to go up against Knight. I think it's pick your poison. Like, either Fnatic dies by, Gen.G's incredibly dominant, like, shot calling and macro, or they die because BLG's bot lane completely destroys Noah. I mean, pick which one it is, right? I don't think there was a good option for them here, but the nature of the draw meant that Fnatic basically had to play one of these teams, and it was going to be a bummer either way. So maybe they lose, perhaps they lose slightly slower to Gen.G than they would against BLG, which might cause pleb fans to think that the losses were less bad, but it is definitely going to be really, really hard for them to play out versus Gen.G.
I also just think like where do you find the angle? Like, I mean, the best case scenario as well is this, right? In theory, you're supposed to think maybe if everything goes right for Noah, he could find a way, and then maybe Pace fucks up the lane a little bit. That's like not totally implausible, but people will already know. I'm already I don't hype Noah as much as other people. I've just noticed he's like way more of a liability, especially because sometimes it looks like it's his choice. Like he just chooses not to engage in a game, or he just looks like he doesn't keep his mental strong. And then also, as I pointed out on past episodes, the drama element that like the more of his personality that leaks out. This is why actually it's a dangerous game to go that route and not be like the StarCraft Korean where you just say the polite things like, cheer for me, I will show good games. Because that's very neutral. You can't really dislike that. The more I find out a Noah's personality, the more I dislike him. I already thought he was like just an like above average LEC player anyway. But then like, I'll give you an example. Just the way he framed his comment in that Ashley Kang interview was fucking ass. Where he was talking, because one thing you always do if you're the Western Korean is you try and desperately form a bond with a way better Korean that lives in Korea and is actually in the top Korean teams. So if you're Berserker, you try and talk about, I don't know, Gumayushi or something. And if you know it, you bang on and on and on about like Ruler and fucking Viper. Because what you want to do is you want to make people think we're all just really good Korean players, aren't we? All to go to these. And so he framed it this way, that like him and Viper had been like sharing messages and encouraging each other. And it just so happened that Noah had made it to MSI this year, but Viper didn't. And it's like, pause. You know why that is, Noah? Because you play in fucking LEC, you bomb. And by the way, you did your best not to be here. I'll tell you that right now. Meanwhile, do you know Viper? He actually played 10 times better than you, but didn't make it because he has to play at 2 of the top 3 teams that are attending this tournament in order to make it here. And do you know what? He still beat one of them almost by himself. Like, give me a break. Like, I already hate that framing so much. Like, bro, that would be like, you know what? Let's extend that further. Let's have the fucking Korean that plays in the CBLOL team do that same one and go, well, do you know what, fucking peanut? You know, it's a shame you're not here, but I'll tell you what, if you try hard, maybe we can meet at Worlds. Like, shut the fuck up, bro. You are the little, if there's ever a time when anyone, I'm also way older, and I am a sort of like an older brother type figure. I actually, unlike all of you shitters in the chat and Gen Alpha or whatever, I can go, little bro thinks he's on the team. Like, who the fuck are you, Noah? Who are you, mate? Like, by the way, you smurfed against Easy Love, actual porn parody name, Nobody Gam team. Like, that's your fucking... show me it now, my dude. Show me now against you. Because we've literally, this is not a made-up narrative. We have talked the whole year about how the biggest liability on this team is Pace. He's actually the guy who had the great glow up last year. And I have to say, mate, the more I think about that now, he did have some good games, but it's like he looked night and day when he had Delight versus Lehensmith. That was another thing. Delight is a fucking banger. So, and everyone knows the only reason Delight's off is because of the peanut shot calling angle. Like, it's not because Delight is an inferior player to Lehens. I don't believe anyone thinks that. So to me, it's like, Pace is supposed to be the scenario where if Noah is what people used to try and make out like Berserker was last year's, this is your chance. Like, that's the one guy that could get ahead. I don't think he will. I think he'll actually make Pace look fucking really good. If anything, he'll give fake hope to all the Gen.G fans. Like, yes, who we thought? Yes, good. It's last year's Pace. I love Pace. Because here's the thing. You're going to basically, instead of actually being the guy who could wreck him, you could basically have been the Pace dispenser. He's going to make your head snap back and then enjoy that delicious fucking fruit that comes out your throat. Blood, I guess, in this metaphor. Whatever. He's some sort of vampire. I made him. Whatever.
I think with Pace though, you know, it and Lehens in particular, like Lehens was brought on board. I think there were several things. It's possible that Delight just wanted the cash money, and so Hanwha offered more. I think Hanwha Life definitely offered Delight more money than Gen.G did, because Gen.G had a limited budget, and we had players like Keen and Canyon coming into this roster who are going to demand more of that budget. Also, Lehens is taking over shot calling duties from Peanuts. It's Chovy and Lehens who are the main voices, and Lehens really shines outside of lane, right? I mean, this is where Lehens, I think, is significantly. He provides more in comms than Delight does. Delight is a little bit quiet. And so he was the player that Gen.G needed to replace Peanut's shot calling effectively. But the price has been that Pays and Lehens are weaker in lane than we saw Pays and Delight last year. Even though they have been getting better, their synergy has been getting better. That's been true. They aren't lane dominant. And Pays, I've called him Ghost 2.0. He just doesn't have fucking main character energy. That's it. There's not a problem with that, but he just needs to play second fiddle on this roster.
Trigger the fuck out of you. Even though you so clearly every single time defined it the way you just did there as a model / metaphor / analog for the role he plays within his team. People every single time you've ever said that, Monty, in the chat go, he is way better than Ghost, though. Yeah, he also doesn't play down more, does he? You fucking moron. I can't handle how dumb people are, because what I've never understood is Twitch chat is actually the worst idea ever, because I'm not a streamer, right? Because what Twitch chat is it's like we're given an amazing fucking theatrical performance, Monty, and in the crowd, distributed, there's just microphones that are turned onto the sound system, and they can just talk on the PA as we're talking. So as we're going like, da, 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 they're just like, I think who's that character there? It's like, what whose idea was this? Like, I said this back in the day to Chaos when he was telling me about how streaming, like, you have to like ride the wave of Twitch chat. I said, mate, that is like actually actively inducing insanity in your mind. Like, you have intrusive, babbling, idiot thoughts of just nobodies as you're trying to think and speak. And you're telling me while you're thinking and speaking, you're going to like try and go, should I address that? No, let that one go. Should I? Like, what are you doing? Like, mate, bro, the fucking Chinese gulags would fucking dream of this technology. This would be what they would do. They would make everyone a streamer and just destroy you with Twitch. Yeah, it's insane, isn't it? I can't handle it, mate. I have to stay out. I just dip in and out. That's me. Dip in and out.
Yeah, look, I think with Gen.G, the thing that worked about Ghost on the Dom 1 roster is that he knew he wasn't the main character. He was like, I will play Ziggs now.
He was the butler. He just knew what his job was. Exactly. Yes.
Like, I fucking need Pays to know what his job is. Yes. That's what I need. The best iteration of Gen.G is the one that enables their top side, just like Dom 1. You want the Chovy, Keen, Canyon, carry jungle, bullshit. That's what everybody wants out of this roster. It's the most successful iteration of this roster, hands down. Pays is a passenger on the fucking bus, and he just needs to realize that. We're not going to protect the Pays compositions. He's not that guy. He needs to do his job with Lehens, maybe gracefully lose lanes at time, and then be a contributing DPS to the incredibly crazy good top side that this team has. That is the ceiling of this roster. Viper and Ruler's not on this team anymore. They didn't get Viper. This isn't the same Gen.G as 2 years ago with Ruler as the main character, right? You've swapped out Thorin for Keen. You want to enable Keen. You want to enable Canyon.
Here's who they need. They need to draft in positional coach Prey. If there is anyone could teach this guy how to play a go even lane and let your top laner carry, this man made a whole career of it. He was the fucking best at it too.
Yeah, just play Ezreal, farm under turret, Gorilla roams on the map, Smeb carries the fucking game. They didn't even have a good mid laner, right?
They need him. Yeah, they made it work.
They like I am the number one Kuro hater in the universe, because I think that Kuro's existence really was the primary hampering. He was the gravity that was dragging the Rock/Ku Tigers down a lot of the time. And had they had an upgraded mid laner, I think we would have been looking at more titles, better international performances. So if Prey could make it work on that roster, and Ghost could make it work, you can make it work too, Pace. You're good, but you're not that good. That's the problem.
Also,
you're good, but you're not that good.
Here's what makes me sick. The one thing I don't like about this bracket, aside from the stupid like conditions they put, so it's not just a proper draw, is, are you ready? I already know how shameless NA fans are. I know how bad they are. So you ready, Monty? Here's what happens. So I think this is what occurs next that will trigger the fuck out of me. I think you get some mad scenario where like eventually it's like fucking let me think. If everyone drops now in the first round, would it actually be Team Liquid against Fnatic? Is that the logic? Is that how it work?
And I believe that's the case, yes.
Which means Fnatic could potentially win a series here. They should be like, oh, fucking did something. It's like, that's Team Liquid, bro. That's Team Liquid. That's not even someone good. That's not G2 that you play. That's Team Liquid.
I mean, I, for one, am really looking forward to the Team Liquid Top Esports matchup, because Top Esports is the worst of by far the worst of the Asian teams that is going. And, you know, I'll say something kind of fucking crazy, Thorin. I'll say something kind of fucking crazy. I think Team Liquid actually has a better matchup versus BLG. Here's my hot take, than Top Esports.
The obvious problem is this, mate. No matter how weak you think Top Esports are, Jackie Love and Mako are going to tear fucking Yon's life apart. It's going to be like Hellraiser 1. They're going to, but it's going to happen here in the lesser team, mate. They're going to actually destroy them. Like, Yon is going to have his mental broken. He's done. He's
what are you talking about? I've been told Yon is a very good player now.
Who knows why? Who knows why? All you need to know is this, guys. When Team Liquid won, everyone didn't do like when you have a dominant team in NA and go, well, they're better than us and we're just trying to match up and improve. Everyone in Cloud9 and FlyQuest was like depressed for a week because they were like, we lost to them. So it's over. It's fucking over, isn't it?
So here's why I think they would actually potentially do better versus BLG, is because BLG, I mean, for all of their early game dominance and like their individual ability, the power of their bot lane, their ability to play through the bot lane, Jun being so aggressive, his great Kindred play, invading the enemy jungle, like they really put the screws to you. The thing is, I could see a universe where Team Liquid lane swaps against BLG, and BLG's late game macro is kind of trash, where Team Liquid is, I do mean this, guys, legitimately a world-class macro team, as crazy as that sounds.
You think they're a better macro team than BLG?
Yes. I do.
That's outrageous, because the problem they're all missing there is all the games you're thinking of BLG not good is against the other top teams.
So I know, but I just see things in Team Liquid where that's the only way they win games is by having good macro and very thorough understanding of win conditions. And so I do think that BLG loses the plot sometimes in late game. Do I think that Team Liquid is a favorite? Absolutely not. I mean, we're talking about like a 5% underdog, versus a 3% underdog. You know what I mean? But I do think that weirdly, they probably do have a slightly better matchup versus BLG. So
problem is, I just think in that one, like I said, look, Impact, there's a world where he can do something. He can't win, but he can do something against 369. Jackie Love is going to absolutely run all over that team. It's going to absolutely destroy you.
Oh, of course. Jackie Love and Mako are super underrated by, I think, the casual fans right now. Both these players are really fucking good at the moment. I mean, the thing about Top Esports is like, you can't even really strike at a potential weakness because APA's champion pool probably isn't going to just bop cream. We're not going to see the humanoid performance, right, in the laning phase that translates into map pressure, because that's not really how APA plays the game. Like, what Team Liquid wants to do is they want to side lane and do, minion wave control and win that way. But, Impact versus 369 not looking super good either, because 369, he wasn't as good, I would say, in the first, in play-ins as he has been. But if you look at the body of work that he's had this year in LPL, he is really, really good right now. If you just watch international competition, you might be like, 369, he was like pretty good, but he had some weak games. But no, that hasn't been the case. He has been incredibly clutch in LPL, just absolutely bailing Top Esports out at certain points in time. Jackie Love has been excellent. And, if Cream can actually bring it for the rest of the tournament, but I just don't think that Team Liquid is the team to punish Cream in the mid lane in the same way that Fnatic was. So I think it's going to be really, really tough for them in this match.
I also just think the part people are missing is the hype from Team Liquid is all from the LCS, right? We made this point after the finals. It's like, you're not going to have Draft Kingdom against the fucking LPL or LCK. Like, that's gone. That's over with. Like, they have deeper picks across the board than anyone you have. Like, the worst thing is, you not only, like, the thing I'll never understand is this. Like, say whatever you like about Cream, mate. What's fucking APA going to do? Is APA even going to get his champions? Is he? If he does, surely it's because there's killer comps on the other side that just destroy and neutralize him. Like, I don't know how he gets to play the game.
Well, it's also that, you know, Cream's champion pool is going to blow up Aurelion Sol.
He has all the fucking picks.
I do think part of Team Liquid's success was that they, to their credit, identified some of the strengths of champions like Aurelion Sol very early on compared to most other professional teams. If you look at when they were playing you know, very good, I mean, Aurelion Sol is strong right now. He's still strong. He's going to see more picks at MSI 100%. And we've seen, you know, basically APA be a specialist on that pick. He's a good Taliyah player as well. He didn't pick up Taliyah earlier than other players, but the champion meta kind of hit Team Liquid right in the face, the mid lane meta. And then on top of that, they were early to the Aurelion Sol adoption. We saw Chovy play it on Gen.G a few times when it was even before it got nerfed, actually. But he was mostly playing it versus bottom tier LCK rosters, so I'm not sure how seriously they were taking that pick. But Team Liquid was taking it super seriously. And by the time we roll around to regional playoffs around the world, Aurelion Sol is an extremely important pick. And Gen.G uses it a couple times very effectively in the finals versus T1. So, but my point is that the advantage that Team Liquid had by prioritizing Aurelion Sol early and be correct that this was a very strong champion and having a player that was uniquely skilled at this champion, that has melted away. Now everybody's aware of Aurelion Sol. It's not really a surprise anymore. It's not a question of, is this a good pick? People are going to be much more aware of matchups that they want to play into it. Cream will be much better prepared for it than he would have been a couple of months ago. So how many of these advantages that Team Liquid accumulated are vanishing over time is a great question. Like, if you played LCS playoffs today, would Team Liquid win?
The other problem I have is I actually, in general, like the teams that can play macro, even if they're weaker. But, like, this is not the fucking age where that works like it used to back in the day, mate. Like, you got to have firepower, too. You got to have, like, star players. Like, and where are they on Team Liquid?
And some, you know, Yun stepped up. CoreJJ stepped up in a big way compared to the last couple of years of performance in the LCS playoffs. Like people don't talk about that enough, but CoreJJ's individual performance, particularly on Rel, was way better than what we've seen from CoreJJ previously.
I'll just throw this out there. The infamous series where he beat IG was 5 years ago.
Yun also, he had good Varus performances, and maybe in some people's mind those overshadowed the Smolder performances, but we have to admit that Team Liquid was to a certain degree Smolder merchants, right?
Of course they were.
They were abusing the scaling of this champion. Team Liquid was abusing the classic NA fact of just pick scaling, wait until enemy team throws, Yun wins the game with Smolder. And while they didn't do it every game Smolder was available, they did win very specific key games in the playoffs with Smolder. And Yun did step up on the Varus, but is the Varus going to be available here? What happens when Jackie Loves plays Draven? That's a great question. Like, do you just have to ban it? Jackie Love's been great on the Senna as well. It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough to deal with top esports. And Team Liquid, like you say, you have to have the firepower. We're at a point in League of Legends history where, you know, Cream's underperformance might just cost top esports a deep run at this tournament because the upper echelon is so fucking good at this point in time. It is so hard to have a player who is basically to win an event and have a player who's just playing kind of okay. Like, basically everybody has to pop off. You know, same thing with Gen.G. If Keen doesn't do well at this event, if Keen has a subpar performance, Gen.G is not going to win MSI. They're not going to. Like, Keen has to step up, get over his choking demons, which he did, fortunately, in the LCK playoffs. But you saw it took the Keen pop-off for Gen.G to go, you know, to put them over the top versus T1. You have to have all of your players performing well to win an international tournament in this game right now. There's no more coasting. There's no more kind of mediocre finals performances. The level of competition is so high in this game that individuals, you can't just like have some guy be the passenger and kind of macro their way to success. You have to be pretty darn good to win.
It's why I actually do think, and it's obviously reflected in like betting odds, etc. G2 T1 is the obvious one in the first round if you want to see something spicy. Like at least there is a world where like you could have something like some of their players can pop off. They have some strong players. They even have players mechanically who can do things against T1. So, and then you've got the coach, you've got the lane swap thing. You've got some things you can try. There's some angles there where it can get interesting.
Still, I think if you're on the betting angle, you parlay 4 3-0s. That's what I would do. I mean, unfortunately, or maybe you parlay the 3-1 for G2 versus T1. Like, I think the issue is that for G2, they were so dominant domestically. Yes, they are a good team, but I think their bot lane also struggled, especially Mykes. Like, Mykes deservedly got the LEC MVP of the year last year, but he hasn't been as good this year. And he has had many moments, where he's died unnecessarily. He seems a bit off. Hans Sama, you know, I was not super impressed with his play in the finals. I wonder how dependent they are on lane swaps. And I think it is an advantage that they probably have more experience with lane swapping, but it's not a surprise anymore. You know what I mean? Like, even by the end of LEC playoffs, it was very transparent what they were doing. They always come up with new shit, though, so we'll see. But T1 also responded so brilliantly in Game 2 to FlyQuest lane swap that T1 seems really prepared for this at this point in time. And I think the bot lane 2v2 is still going to be an issue for them. So good luck. I think G2 does, you know, the nice thing for G2 is like what? They've probably faced PSG in the losers bracket. Like G2 could, and I think the matchup we all want to see is G2 versus top esports. That's the one I'm most curious about, because I think the top 3 in Asia are all like pretty clear cut at this point in time. And I don't think G2 has a chance against T1, Gen.G, or BLG.
That's like, well, yeah, that's the one interesting one is obviously, yes, if top esports beats Team Liquid and they lose to Gen.G, you get them in the lower. That would be plausible.
Yeah,
or at least
and I think that's
fun.
Right, that's the really interesting matchup, because
you can even imply as well. They can just ask Fnatic, what did you do against top esports? You can get some sort of insight from them. As to
I'm sure they've already talked about it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I'm sure they've already discussed it. But it really is one of those things where top esports, even if Tien has a fucking, you know, if he completely collapses like he did in the LPL finals, like Team Liquid was just not, you know, they're not good enough to beat top esports, even at top esports worse, I think. But G2 is. Like, if Cream has a bad game, we saw what Humanoid did. Caps can do the same thing. If Tien has a bad game, I totally believe that G2 could win a series. You know,
it's crazy, isn't it? When you consider his actual resume, Tien has to be one of the most brittle like champions ever. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, he's the only player who has been a Worlds MVP and a .A award winner. I mean, his variance is crazy. His variance within the LPL playoffs is crazy. It wasn't that he was bad for the entire LPL playoffs. He was just bad on the day of the LPL finals. He was terrible. And he was the single biggest factor in Top's loss. If you go back and watch the previous series in the winners bracket between Top and BLG, it was much closer, much more compelling series. But this is what I'm talking about. When you get to that level of competition, you have a guy who has a bad day. You can't overcome it as a team. You can't. And he had he played really bad in those finals. Really bad.
And if it's the jungle, you're especially fucked. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, it was just weird because it was like they had the right idea to start the game sometimes, and then they completely fucked up the execution. I had no idea what was going on. It was a very weird play from top esports in those finals. And especially from Tien. So Tien I think is generally a very good player. He is Peanut-esque in that he has some brilliant pathing at times, but he inexplicably chokes and like kind of feeds and griefs in important games. So you know, the Cream inexperience and the Tien factor, the wild card factor, really I think hold top esports back from being a favorite at this tournament. And also potentially, you know, G2 on a good day, I think absolutely can take that win. So that's the match I want to see. I mean, the matches that people like, at least that I want to see most, are probably what T1 BLG Gen.G, and then G2 top are the series that I really, really hope we get out of this event.
I mean, the good news is we should get the BLG T1 matchup, so we'll get that interesting.
I really hope we do.
And I also, by the way, there's another one. If you're wondering how I can reference so many different articles, because I write an article a day at the moment on my Substack, so I actually just published one now, which I had custom artwork done by the best fucking artist in esports, like Nicolas Choissois or whatever the fuck. The guy did all the Blizzard stuff back in the day. I have one that's about Knight. It's called The Age of the Golden Left Hand, where I explain to you why, just like I did with our Chovy one, this guy's like actually like better than Faker. He's just an unbelievable player. Like he's fucking cracked out of his mind. And if you ever put it this way, when you go and look at some of the stats I pull up, they'll melt your brain. Like over the last 4 splits, his teams win like 80% of their games or something. It's like an 85% of series. He's lost one of his last 15 best of 5s that were at real tournaments, not Demacia Cup. Like this guy's impossible. Like, and by the way, he's the only overlap like Chovy is between all those teams. Like everyone changed around him and he just keeps going. Like this guy's fucking unbelievably cracked. So just like you saw, he was the MVP of the finals last MSI, remember guys? I actually can't wait to see that matchup, like T1 against this team, because right now, T1's going to have a fucking world's gloat, mate. Because as of right now, BLG should spank them.
Yeah.
BLG's a super team. It's fucking really... Remember, most of the focus from the Westlands is on fucking Elk right now because he's cracked too. Like, this team's insane. The joke is, Bin's the guy who's just sort of chilling at the moment. He doesn't have to be the best anymore. He used to be the guy on BLG, remember?
Well, and the scary thing about Bin is that we know how he performs internationally. This guy always has
anytime, yeah. You give him
the international glow ups, right? But he's been playing more weak side on this roster, and I mean it makes sense. Like you switched in Knight into this roster, but this roster was people look at JDG's super team last year and they forget that BLG was like 1 game away a lot of the time from winning, and that was before they had Knight.
No, they were a really good squad. Yeah, remember they broke the record that BLG now broke with Knight of the most wins ever when it was in that summer split when they finished in first. So yeah, people don't realize this team is so insanely good. I almost feel like because people think if they don't follow LPL, like haha, JDG super team failed. It's like it's the LPL motherfucker. So there's a new super team, and this one has even got Koreans in. Time for the new super team. Like, oh, please, no, LPL, no. You don't get away with it, boys. Like, and especially, by the way, when we're talking about these talents, Chovy and Knight, anytime they join an already really elite team, it's automatically going to be a super team. Think about how that works. Like, these guys were already, like, the best players. It's why, actually, I've told you, what's so funny is this is going to be just like Simple and Device in Counter-Strike, mate, where when they used to tell me, you're picking the wrong player, pick the guy who already wins. I was like, no, wait, because once these guys do win at the top level, they're never going to look back, mate. And it's going to look, you're going to look so stupid. You're going to be like those fans who did tell me that like Simple will never be the best or like Device will only ever choke. And then he won the most majors of anyone who was a star player. Like, it's going to be like that when like, I mean, listen, Knight's already won his MSI. He's the reigning champion technically. But when these guys, one of them wins, like put it this way, their odds on one of them's going to win Worlds this year. When they win Worlds, you're going to look, it's going to age really poorly if you were the guy like, he's not even good. That's not even the angle. You go with the angle of like they didn't perform at the top level. If you actually think that like Faker's like a better player, you can say he's more clutch. Debatable, but you could try that angle. The idea that like, he's better, like you don't have no high test, mate. Like Knight is unbelievable. Like just go look up like a Knight game on like the classic ones like Jace, fucking Silas, LeBlanc. He has games where like the joke is the casters who regularly cast the LPL can't even keep up what he's doing on LeBlanc. Like when he goes back to the fucking, he's insane the moves he can do, mate. The insane.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he basically is probably the best Ahri player in the world right now. He's the best Syndra player in the world, even though Syndra is kind of fringe on the meta. You know, his champion pool is crazy good. Obviously, people don't like his Azir very much, and that is going to be a core pick. But even in the finals,
fuck around and win on the finals on it, though. Just still fuck around.
I think Grasp Azir has actually been a boon to him because it's given him a little bit more wiggle room to play Azir and play it more as an engaged champion. So under current, you know, certain Azir builds, I think he can be good. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly not his signature champion, but he did have some good plays on it in the finals, and it was passable. I do think they have a tough matchup versus T1 because the thing about BLG is, you know, BLG is kind of ooga booga smash lane win game team. Especially through the bot side. Like Elk and On are so fucking good right now, and Jun just plays through that bot side lane. The problem is like T1, you could say does the same thing, but T1 has substantially better late game like cross mapping and shot calling than BLG does. So, basically what I'm concerned about is, first off, BLG is now stealing strats from T1, which means that T1 is actually leading the meta when it comes to teams like BLG and T1. You look at the finals, well, here we go. All of a sudden, here comes Orin support, which had really only been played by FPX. And T1, specifically T1 is the better team that plays it, though. Here comes the Nico support. I mean, BLG was clearly very heavily borrowing in the LPL finals from T1's compositions. And T1 is just, I mean, their Baron calls, their cross-mapping, their vision traps, it's much better than BLG's. So even though I think BLG may do better against the field, T1 may, in fact, because they play similar styles in the bot lane, except T1 has the better late game macro, this might be a scenario where T1 can actually upset BLG. I think they come in at, I think this is just MSI. This MSI is very matchup dependent, and I think T1 matches up very well into BLG.
I like to hear for you. BLG just loses to everyone in the world with good macro, but bizarrely in the LPL, no one can ever get to that point. It's weird how that works, isn't it? It's weird. Because here's the problem with that, Monty. It's actually why I know why fans didn't know why JDG is the best team ever. Because the same logic was they always come from behind with team fighting. The difference was they could always get to that point. That was the craziest. That's why I did just think it might be the best team ever, because it was like they were the MMA or boxer guy that could just take all the abuse and then always win in the last round, as it were, right? Normally you'd say, well, that's a terrible strategy because you get knocked out early, won't you? But they never did, bizarrely, until T1 won that one series. That was the only one they lost. The difference is BLG, like when you say all the things you've just said there, what I want to know is, how do you get that macro off when you lose 2 out of 3 lanes? How the
I
fuck
agree. That's the problem.
How do you ever even get those objectives and get those map movements when
you don't? That's why BLG is winning.
Fox owner and destroys his mental completely and has him going to picks in game 3 4. He's already broken. He's all over. That's the thing. This team is so fucking, like, the knockout power from this BLG team is crazy. And I think also that's why I actually low-key love that the finals was just Night on Azir, because it's going to make some people a la Double Lift actually underrate this team and think that, like, they're not that good really. And it's like, mate, watch when he isn't on Azir, mate. Watch how they go then. And by the way, if you like, the Elk guy alone is like, he could be the MVP of the tournament too. Like, this guy's unbelievable right now. Guma's good, but is he Elk? I don't know about that.
No,
so
I mean,
I'm interested.
What I'm doing is, obviously BLG is one of the favorites, but I don't think they're invincible, and they do have flaws. I think one of the problems with LPL is that last year the best macro team was LNG, and they were just fucking dog shit this year, right? Without Tarzan on the roster, they were kind of a shadow, and Scouts underperformance, they were a shadow of their former selves. So I would argue that there wasn't a very good I mean, FPX probably was one of the better macro teams, but even then they were dealing with a lot of kind of bum players or new players. And so, it takes a lot of firepower, I think, to defeat BLG. I'm just saying that with the bot lane styles that both T1 and BLG have, it is going to be a battle in the bot lane. And if T1 wins that battle in the bot lane, I think they have better macro. And if they lose that battle, the question is, how much do they lose it by, and can the macro overcome it? I mean, I just watched T1 play a finals where in game 1, they got completely shit on by Gen.G, and yet they still made it a very competitive, long game because they were cross-mapping so well. T1 has some very distinct strengths around objective control that drag games out, and they are probably the best team in the world at playing from behind.
Yeah, but I also saw them play against Hanwha Life and get booty clapped. That happened too. True. That was real. Now let me know if you can. When did BLG get booty clapped? Hasn't happened yet.
No,
only in people's minds.
That's why BLG is a favorite at this tournament. Yeah. But if I have to shadow box matchups, and I have to say ways in which I think, and earlier when I was talking about Team Liquid, I didn't say I think Team Liquid would win. I just think Team Liquid has a better matchup versus BLG than top esports. Sure. Now, that doesn't change the win percentage by a whole lot. They lose either way, but maybe it would be a slightly closer series, is my point.
Also why I think if people tunnel on stupid shit like Faker versus Knight, you're going to miss the point completely, which is, it wouldn't even matter if it is true that Faker's more clutch. Like, the idea, by the way, being more clutch, but with none of the other qualities makes you the better player. It doesn't even make sense. If you never watched sports before, like, the joke is, if you follow the NBA, there's a guy on the Heat called Jimmy Butler who's mega clutch, but he's not even vaguely a top 5 player in the NBA. But if you get him in the right playoff game, if you can get him to the end of the game, he might win you the game. That's the point with the Faker angle, is like, it doesn't matter whether Faker's more clutch than Knight. How's he going to get in position to win? Because, by the way, before you go, he did against Shed. No, he didn't. Actually, I think you'll find fucking people like Ahri were fucking like double agents helping him get to that point in the game. Like, they almost fed him a kill at one point in that match. So, like, I just want to see straight up. Let me see you get to that point. Let me see you do these things. I'll tell you another obvious one that people are missing as well. If we're going to bring up Bin, mate, he's in fucking Zeus' head. I want to see that matchup. Let's see what happens when they play. Dude, Bin was even doing well when T1 did beat BLG at Worlds. Like this, I think that's another one where I get scared every time I see Zeus go out. The problem is when he looks good, he's so good, but he's in that fucking TN category too. He wakes up on the wrong side of the bed one day, mate. It's nightmare fuel for his teammates. He should be the best, but it just doesn't happen for some reason. Who knows why?
I mean, that game 5 versus Keen gives you pause, doesn't it, in LCK playoffs? Because it was, you think, oh, Zeus finally had the glow up. He had a really good World Finals. All right, he's over the yips. He's not going to choke anymore. And then we get back domestically, and all of a sudden, he basically is the single biggest weak point in game 5 of the finals.
The joke is he's the reason that like Keen got to be the MVP, not Chovy. Because of fucking Zeus.
Which is outrageous.
He did the alley-oop that allowed Keen to dunk it and get the iconic moment and win the MVP. Yeah, it is. But like, whatever, I get it. It's a narrative. It's all good.
It's just like Chovy like hits every shot for the entire series, but because Keen does a 360 dunk at the end, it's like, Keen's the MVP. It's like, no, you don't understand.
That's also why this tournament is cool, though, because think about it this way, guys. Like, across all the Asian teams, you have like bona fide legends, but also people still making their careers. So you have Faker and you have Mako, and by the way, even Jackie Love, these people are all champions, by the way. If you don't know, these are world champions, right? But then you do have the people who want to be the next one. You want the Knights and the Elks and the Chovies and the Keens, and these people want to become the world champion in the MSI. I mean, obviously Knight did it in the MSI champ, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what's so great is you have a nice blend of both. And also, the reason I love this format is, look, it didn't happen before, but there really is the chance that we just get like 2 versions of all the best matchups. That's the fucking dream, isn't it? Imagine that.
And that is the upside. That is the upside to only having, one team from each region in either side of the bracket. Is the deeper we go, the more likely we are going to get more of these matchups. So, we can argue about whether it's intellectually honest to do it this way.
It isn't, but here's the thing, Monty. I've already decided that I'm on the UFC angle. I don't give a shit who the rankings are. Just give the big legendary fighter the fight against the current champion so we can all do the what if. Just give me the prize fight that I'll pay for the ticket for. So the prize fight is I want to see Knight against Faker, Knight against Chovy. These are the matchups I want to see. Give me those matches.
Yeah, well, I think it's very likely we will get them. And if there's an upset, then there's going to be a reason for that upset, at least. Like if G2 suddenly pulls off the miracle, it'll be because G2 is playing really well.
By the way, I'm just going to do this because I have to say it. Look, Monty, I don't even know why I'm doing this because he's on the show, so I guess he is associated with me. But he didn't tell me any of these opinions and we've never discussed them before. I have to say the talent I am actually the most disappointed with in all of League of Legends is fucking Dracos of the LEC, mate. Because this guy, I've known a lot of the greatest casters in the history of esports. I mean, friends with some of them. I've talked shop with them. I've tried to find out, how do you do, like, for example, if people don't know, people might not like certain things about his personality, but Sadikist was incredible at having, like, something he came into a game with in the back of his mind, like, right, if I get a chance, I'm going to use this. But what made him amazing was he so rarely ever missed when he would take that shot. He would just somehow pick the right moment to work it in there. And even if it was prepared, it would be appropriate. It would make the moment because he chose like something he could sound like sense the context. What I hate about the LEC in general, and it wasn't Dracos who started this meta, but he lives up to it to this day, is they're all trying to get the Joe Miller iconic call. Every big game, especially international, is just about fuck the game and the context. Can I get the line in there? And Dracos is the most criminal version of this because I actually think his talent actually exceeds most of the other talents. I think he's actually probably skill-wise, he could be the best in League of Legends. But he is so fucking cynical. Like when I was writing my night piece, I went and watched loads of montages at night to get myself in the headspace, right? Bro, there's a whole montage. Remember, he was the MVP of fucking MSI. There's a whole montage of MSI 2023, and every single fight is like this, Monty. It's like and they're coming in on them. Scan of the week. So Syndra from mid does it. Syndra's killing them. It's like they've scattered, and now that allows Ruler to come in, and Ruler's doing damage, and Ruler. It's just the whole Knight montage is just Ruler said every 3 words, and Knight almost is never said as a word as he like kills, does like an insane CC combo, flashes over the wall. Like even when he does the best, and they never say the word Knight. He just keeps. It's because in his mind, Monty, he's gone into that game deciding Ruler is the best player, and Ruler's going to carry this game. And what he's trying to do is create a moment that's iconic for when Ruler pops off on the Zeri and does the ace, right? And in doing so, he's even doing the force that I hate, where you force it in a way that like it would sound cool, but because it didn't fit, you end up like a Hollywood hack. You just said something cliched. So there's one moment where they try to dive onto fucking Ruler in a team fight, like just below the river near the dragon. And when they try to dive on Ruler, he just says, I think it's BLG even playing, he just says some line like, to beat a god, you've got to become a god. And it's like, if you stop and pause, that means nothing. That means actually not. In League of Legends, that means nothing. Like, you actually, guess what? To kill an ADC champion, you don't have to be a god. Like, what? The metaphor doesn't even work. It sounds cool in a trailer. If that was cut together in a trailer, or it had been the best play ever. Like, if Knight had done that to Faker and beaten him, that would even be like, that would make sense. That would be where, like, Sadicus would have used it, and he would have nailed the line, and that would have been, like, the cool moment, like when T1 played JDG, and they had to, like, win the 5th game. That would be where that line would bang. But it's like he just decided no matter what, he's going to find a moment, and he's got the crowbar ready, and he's just ready to like get it in there. And so like, one, I hate that style. And then 2, it's actually mental that someone was the MVP and they treated him like he was Robin the whole fucking time. Because if you ever go and watch these highlights, Monty, if you know like mid lane, they are so bonkers. Like the fucking shit, like you should see like his, put it this way, even the Annie ones, he does like flash blare slaps where like people like T1 don't even know there's an angle there. He just pulls it out of nowhere and lands like a 3-man stun. And it's like, bro, they're casting it like he's just a peon and Ruler's 1v9ing. And I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? Like they're all stars, these guys, you know?
I think that the LEC in general is relatively guilty of this because the LEC basically became the narratives league.
Sure.
And they saw success with it. That's why, you know, it starts with success. The LEC's success came from selling narratives. It is true, though. A huge part of why the LEC gained popularity was because they realized, you know, the old complaint of LCS versus NA versus EU LCS was, oh, all the personality is in NA LCS, and the players are so boring in Europe. Yes. And so what the casters did was they took over the narrative from the players. And the whole thing, you know, one of the great things about LEC has been that they have focused super hard on the narratives, and where the players oftentimes were some, you know, kind of distant, cold Scandinavian, you know, rather, you know, not particularly emotive personalities. They were able to transform that into big time storylines, right? And the other thing that happened in conjunction with this, Thorin, was that the casters basically went on a mission to make themselves the stars of LEC. You know, all of the skits, the music, everything like that. And I say this as somebody, I'm not criticizing it. I like this about LEC in many ways. But all of the skits are basically like, look, here's our fucking band, the band of the casters. And here's our fucking skit, the skit where the casters are often doing narrative jokes. And I love some of the content that they made. So, for example, like the LEC card game that they made was brilliant. And I know Dracos was heavily involved in that. It was a fucking brilliant way to tell the stories in a fun manner.
Yeah.
It was a really great piece of content. But the problem with LEC is that is all it is. That's all it is narratives, right? It basically, the narratives and the caster star power has now overpowered absolutely everything else. And I mean, it's worked in some ways. It's been very effective for Kadril. Do you think that Kadril would have been as big as he is if he hadn't been the star of the LEC caster show? I don't. Right? It was a very helpful way to leverage himself into massive co-streaming popularity. If Kadril had been an LCS or an LCK caster, I don't think he would be as big as he is right now. That's my theory.
Probably true.
because that LEC is uniquely positioned to do that for casters. So I do think in a way that LEC, you know, the success that they've had through doing these very specific factors that has made LEC unique has also now in some ways overpowered, you know, it's now too much, right? It's too much of a good thing. And I do think sometimes that the LEC doesn't, now they just get lost in their own sauce. And they're not capable of, you know, going against the narratives. I mean, this is the same thing. Like, why do we keep seeing Karmine Corp as like match of the week? They fucking suck. But it's just the narratives. Like the only thing they do is like ride the vibes now. And they over promote garbage ass teams like Karmine Corp. And they give them too much time, and it's not about the actual performance in the game. It's like what is the social media's talking about today, and that's what they go with. And maybe you like that, maybe you think that's justified from a business perspective, but it's not intellectually honest. And it certainly is not intellectually honest to be like, yes, Karmine Corp match of the week again. It's like, no, they fucking trash. Like, why are we doing this?
Also, to me, I just think, like, look, maybe they do because they do the band thing. Maybe they just want to be a star and be an entertainer. Maybe that's their vision. I just don't get it because all the people I fuck with who are the best want to be the best caster in the world. And that requires things like actually like learning all the beats and doing it where it's appropriate. That requires never like overselling a narrative that's bullshit and always giving it up to the best player. If you want to be the actual best in the world, that you got to be legit. Like if you disrespect the game will disrespect you.
Yeah. And, you know, I do think in a certain way, you know, I'll be cynical here, but the casters have to know that the writing is on the fucking wall for them. They have to know that, you know, co-streaming is now way bigger than the main broadcast in LEC. It's now become way bigger in the LCK. What is the justification for paying casters? Like, why should Riot pay good casters big money when they can get better viewership on co-streams for free, right? And it pains me to say this, but basically the career of casting is probably over. And so now, Thorin, what we're going to see is basically a race to use casting resources on the main broadcast to champion yourself as a caster, because eventually you're going to have to pivot into being a personality. That's it. Like the best outcome of this is like no one should want to be a caster anymore. The casters don't even want to be casters anymore. It's not the best option. You make 10% of the money of a co-streamer and you do way more. I'm not gonna say work because co-streamers work very hard. Like, you know, streaming for 12 hours a day is not fucking easy. But in terms of, you know, commitment to craft, everything like that, you know, work in the broadcast that you're doing, hour for hour, it is harder to be a caster than a co-streamer. Like in a 1 hour block of time that you're on broadcast, it is much harder to be a caster. You have to talk more, you have to prep more, you have to go to more meetings. Like, and the
eat on camera, you have to actually be on all the time.
You know, it's harder. It is. You know, it's harder to do this show than it is to do an hour of co-streaming. But the thing is that the rewards for co-streaming are so vast at this point in time, and also the opportunity to parlay it into a bigger non-esports focused career. Like Kadril is probably going to eventually graduate from League of Legends and become one of the biggest kind of general gaming streamers in the world. He's already just has such a vast audience that, you know, him being the next big streamer in the world is a possibility. Like that's on the table for him right now. So, you know, if I'm looking at this and I was a caster today, I would be totally out on casting. So why not just use every single resource that I have to do music stuff, right? I mean, I was very cynical back in the day about, if you guys remember, there was a piece of content a few years ago that LCS released that was like Dash and Kobe fighting.
Oh, yeah. Where it was like slow-mo and like an action movie sequence, yeah.
Riot hired like, you know, actual like Marvel fight choreographers for that. And they spent weeks training for that fight sequence. Now, that fight sequence was trash as esports content. It
No,
had nothing.
The fight sequence should have been like doublelift against Jensen, or like Bjergsen against Jensen. Something like, it should be something like that. It should have been players doing that if you're going to do it.
It did nothing for the hype. Like, because basically it was them disagreeing about some analytic point, and then 5 minutes of them fighting, and then there was no actual conclusion, and it didn't do anything to hype up the players, the league, anything.
Oh.
As esports content, it was terrible. As a standalone piece of content, it was really impressively made, and credit to Dash and Kobe. But also, you have to understand that Dash is at his core an actor. And if I'm Dash and I have a chance to create a reel of me doing like film combat, and I can put it on my resume that I worked with these Marvel fight choreographers, it's incredibly valuable to his CV. It's not incredibly valuable as a piece of esports content, much less to spend weeks making it. I mean, what a fucking shitty waste of money from an esports content perspective. But if I was Dash or Kobe, selfishly, it would be super fun to do it. And also, it's something I can use in the future. And like, I think if you are a caster these days, you do have to just grab whatever resources you can, because your career is done. Like, your career is dying. There is no other way to look at esports casting as long as co-streaming exists, because you will be secondary. You are the background voice to the co-streamer. You are paid. And eventually, Riot's going to figure out that they don't have to pay you that much anymore, because you're not necessary. And that's how it is. And it sucks, and I hate it, but that's how it is.
I also just think you have to be careful what you wish for, Monty, because obviously I would say, because everyone thinks this way, wouldn't it be better if the world was like me? So I wanted everyone to do all these skits and banter and stuff. You know what? Just leave it to me, guys. It's not working for you guys. Like, they do this in Counter-Strike. Like, ESL still does this, Monty, where they'll get a funny skit idea. We would have done it for Flashpoint. They get a funny skit idea from a movie, but then instead of it being a 30-second joke, it's the whole scene. And eventually, like they did a great one the other day. They did it where instead of Joe Rogan, it was
Moses,
actually
very funny.
And it was called Joe. Yeah, but the problem is it's like a 5-minute segment, Monty.
Yeah,
and they do it, and it's like you've killed the joke. You know what I mean? Like, the joke was great if it was like a 1-minute one or a 30-second one. And then also when they do the movie ones, eventually it's just like a bad Mad Libs of the exact scene with the script, right?
Yeah.
No, take the premise of the scene, and once I know that it's a scene from this movie, now you can do anything creative with it. Now you can change up completely the dialogue. Now you can put all really other funny other jokes into it, but they don't. That's the part they miss. And so the problem is, I can't tell whether it's because people get between the creatives and the skit, or if actually the talent themselves don't know that, like, you've made it go too far. Like, you got to be more simplistic. Like, if people don't know, the Flashpoint skits out like 7 minutes long, mate. Come on, like, they're like 2 or 3, and you hit the high point, so you get out. Yeah, you get out after you've hit the high point.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is all to say that, like, I think Dracos is a good caster. I think that the sin of LEC is that they're too lost in the sauce right now. And unfortunately, Riot has created an atmosphere where it's not even productive to not be lost in the sauce. Like, you literally, it's like fucking crabs in a bucket at this point in time with casters. And
it's also, by the way, from knowing Riot in League and Valorant, it's the most backbiting community of talent I've ever seen in my entire life, Monty. Ever. It's crazy. The stories are fucking wild, mate.
Yeah, and everybody would take any shot to get out of this situation. Yes. So it really is very petty at this point in time. And especially because Riot is just like getting rid of Dash, getting rid of Quickshot. Now, you know, the dangers there. You're not going to take risks. It's all about the land grab of getting as much as you can get for as long as you can get it, because the writing's on the wall, basically.
I mean, I've got a great way to explain the way Riot is different from other scenes, because someone on my Discord said something where they were like, oh, I'll bet that, like, because they know that premise that you have all the production meetings and you agree on some of the narratives, and they took it too far. They were like, right. And then Riot tells you, like, you know, I want you to say these things, but then don't say this. And I was like, whoa, no, that's the one part that's very subtle, Monty. They don't tell you what not to say. They create an environment that would be so hostile if you said it, that when you see someone give the wrong feedback or say the wrong thing, and suddenly, no matter who they are, their ass is on LEC or the LPL, and they're never on LEC again, or they're on for 1 week. You just know, like in a true tyrannical regime, I will self-censor. I don't have to be told not to say it. My brain will go, whoa, that might not be what to say, and then you won't ever say it.
I'll do an example for you guys, a topical example. So probably a lot of you have been watching Shogun out there, and in Shogun, as it approaches, so spoilers if you haven't watched Shogun, like don't listen to what I'm about to say, but many of you have already watched it. It is very good. And at the end of the series, there's an implication that basically all the nobles are imprisoned by Ishido in Osaka Castle, and they can't leave, even though it's never really explicitly stated that they're hostages.
Well, you can keep saying you can go anytime. It's just, you can't, obviously, You can't,
And, it takes Mariko literally actually trying to leave when she knows she might be killed. Everybody knows that that's the case, but it's basically just implied. Like they're in this situation. You don't have to say anything because the stakes are so fucking clear as to what's going on, and nobody's going to stick their neck out there because it takes an insane amount of bravery to do something like that. And even though obviously that's hyperbole, it's not life or death stakes. It will kill your career. And you know what? If I was a caster and I saw what happened to Dash after he left Riot, I'd be scared because so many of these people have done nothing to diversify their career. They have not gotten any additional skills. Like they haven't gone out there and run their own businesses or tried other things. They have just been casters. They've been sitting there for a decade, just being like, I love working 2 days a week at the LCS, not creating their own content, not making themselves into other personalities, not really even streaming or doing anything like that in the game that they're in, much less trying to say like, oh, I would like to go do this other thing. They don't do consulting around the industry. They don't have any business acumen. They have no valuable skills outside of casting this game. And that isn't even a valuable skill anymore because the co-streamers usurp you. So
within this metaphor, though, here's why I don't feel sorry for certain figures anymore. Because it's one thing, Monty, if in the world of Shogun, they grab you, imprison you, and kill you. Maybe they boil you alive. But in this scenario, Dash, actually, when he was on his outs, was like, let me please commit honorable seppuku. And then he let them just chop his fucking head off. So at that point in time, you know what? You were participant, you were complicit.
I mean, and the crazy thing is these people don't even come out afterwards and be like, look, I assume the reason Quickshot's not doing it is because he got the bag, but Dash just got nothing. So
yeah, but that's also where the dirtiest thing about Riot and all TOs always is they try to make as many of the people you interact with the people who are like friendly to you, and then the people who fuck you are often like higher up people. So what happens is when you leave, you do that thing where it's like, but I don't want to like be mean to all my friends who work there and shit on them. There are good people there, guys, and they have the best interest. And then in doing so, you actually have let yourself get fucked, and you've gone, but they're not really fucking me. It's like, well, brilliant then, great, well done. Because I always say this: here's the angle people don't understand. That's not cool, because what you're doing is like Danny's family in the EG scenario. You're helping the next guy get fucked over too. And what's even worse is when he gets fucked over, he knows the script. He's supposed to say it was sort of his fault and it's no one's fault. And actually, it's just the way things go. And he's very grateful to give me a break. Like at least in CS, by the way, we have the balls to sort of go fuck them when we leave. Well,
the thing is, Thorin, they're not getting fucked now. And that's the point, is that the fucking is inevitable. Obviously, like if you look at this from the outside, you're like, nobody is going to survive the fucking. The spiked dildo of Damocles is in front of your asshole. You're just making it so it doesn't happen this week. It's going to happen in a year from now.
That's reality. That is the reality of casting.
All right. Well, on that note, I think I can transition us, Thorin. I think I can transition us, because if you would like to watch Shogun, perhaps you could use one of our sponsors, which is, of course, ExpressVPN. And ExpressVPN is great because it allows you to access content that you can pay for legally, but maybe don't have access to based on your geography. So we encourage you to pay for streaming services, but maybe some of the streaming services you pay for, they change a little bit from country to country. Well, wouldn't it be convenient if you could put yourself into that country as well as keeping your security? And especially, Thorin, at a tournament like MSI, which is taking place in Chengdu, China, you probably don't want to go to China and then let the CCP have all of your info. I mean, they're going to get that from Vanguard being installed on your computer anyway, I guess. The obvious joke there.
The amount of bootlicking around that was mental too, but we'll get to that later. There will be something coming on that, don't worry. We'll get to something on that. We'll do something about that.
I don't typically like having my personal data shared all around, especially if I am in China or, on public Wi-Fi networks, which I was traveling internationally, you better believe I had my ExpressVPN on my app on when I was on the Incheon airport in Korea, free Wi-Fi. Love the free Wi-Fi. That's very helpful. Don't love it when people can skim my personal information and sell it on the dark web. That sucks. So, it's very low cost, protect yourself. And trust me, it's a lot less expensive than trying to, scrub the internet of your personal details or change all of your passwords or whatever else you have to deal with as a result of you making these mistakes. So ExpressVPN, they've got many, many uses. Security is great. It's totally encrypted. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. So don't really have to worry about that. And it works on absolutely everything that you have. Obviously, there's a PC client, so you can run it on that. You could run it on routers, so you can install it on your router and just protect everything that's going through your entire network. Your phone, obviously, if you're on the go. Your tablet, obviously, again, if you are on public Wi-Fi networks, which you often are with tablets. So it's been great for me. I've loved this experience. I haven't even noticed it be, really slow on my phone, because now that I'm in Colorado, they have so many different servers. I just connected their Denver server now, so it's super easy. So wherever you are, the ping is not going to be too much of an issue in my experience. So it's been great. Definitely, if you would like to have that security, or, check out Shogun and you don't have access to it currently, legally, of course, do it legally. Go ahead and get ExpressVPN. It's awesome. So secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/summoning. That's expressvpn.com/summoning, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/summoning. So they'll extend your subscription by 3 months. Totally worth it. It's definitely so much better than dealing with the hassle of your personal data being stolen and sold. Because
also, Shogun is actually pretty good.
Yeah,
it's actually one of the few examples of prestige TV that's pretty good without all the stupid political bullshit reinserted and crowbarred in. It's actually a throwback to some degree.
And you know what, Thorin? What's great about it is it ends. It's not going to have a season 2. It just ends. So we get a complete storyline that's good before it devolves into endless seasons of trash. So I do love that. I also love, spoilers again for the end of Shogun, they don't even really show the battle. It's like the battle's already been won before it's been fought, which is just such a fucking cool way to end the series, in my opinion. So loved it. I thought it was really good. All right. So any other final thoughts on MSI teams before we do viewer questions, Thorin? I mean, the crazy thing is this first round is probably just going to be nonsense, right? We're not going to get good games until Friday, really, when we start to deal with round 2 of the bracket. The initial, these should all be very one-sided. Any upset here is going to be a massive, massive surprise.
Sure. The obvious thing is, as soon as you do get out of the first round, though, everything just gets mega spicy. Even if you think Team Top Esports is weak, I still want to see him against Gen.G. Still a great match, still a fucking fun matchup, right? Again, if we were going to say earlier, if Piers is the weak spot, fucking Jackie Love is the aggressive AD carry who could take advantage of that, mate. Give me that matchup. Let me see it. Let me see that game.
Yeah, it could be really interesting too to see Chovy is no melee mid lane slouch. The melee battle's potential with Cream is huge, which would be really fun too.
If people don't know, that has always been Chovy's mistress, even though you'd think because he's the fucking lane god, he'd be the mage player. This guy loves to fucking opt notoriously into the melee and go crazy.
Cassante. Yeah. Weird shit. So he definitely plays basically Cream's entire champion pool as well. So it could be quite intriguing to see that mid lane matchup. And obviously top lane too. Keen versus 369 is a total banger. So yeah, I think we're going to be due for some good games. Fortunately, we will have all those good games to talk about by the time we get onto our show next week. And we'll probably gloss over this first round because it will be well in the rearview mirror at that point in time and probably not particularly compelling. Again, any upset here could be an all-time great match. So there's the possibility, but it's going to be, I think, super tough for any of the underdogs to take out, the favorites. So might be a little bit boring for the next few days. the start of MSI has not been the most exciting, but I am hoping in 2 weeks' time when we look back at this tournament, Thorin, that we're gonna see, we're gonna look back and say, holy shit, this was a great.
Think about last time when it got to that upper bracket final of T1 versus G. It was a banger. That was one of the best series of the year.
Yeah,
it was
great.
Fantastic, yeah.
Very, very good. So still the best format. If you guys have been sleeping on MSI, now's the time to start, or later this week, I should say. The final 10 days of competition is going to be absolute bangers. So we'll look forward to that. We'll take a quick break, guys. And when we come back, we will do some viewer questions.
Right, we're going to do viewer questions now. Obviously, we've had to skip them on some of the past ones just because of time constraints, where we are in the world, scheduling, etc. But if you wanted to ask a viewer question, it's simple. You just subscribe to our Discord, the Last 3 Nation Discord, and then there's a channel where you can submit specifically for this show the questions you're interested in putting to us.
Yep. And we've done a pretty good job recently, but last week, obviously, with our mega preview, when the show is 4 or 5 hours long, it's hard to get to viewer questions. So sorry about that. We're back now. Are there any players' careers that may be viewed very differently today if we had 3 international events and expanded MSI all this time? I mean, Rookie's probably the obvious answer here because he would barely miss international events and having additional shots at them. Knight also, Chovy potentially also. It's just unfortunate because without the extra international events, it's hard for players to really make their name.
I mean, the obvious thing to me is the people who are sort of GOAT candidates who never won. So Smeb, Uzi, you give them an extra crack each year, surely they're going to win one. You know what I mean? I also think, by the way, in some ways, it might even to some degree unravel some narratives. For example, if there were even more of these competitions and then some of them, there was one where Faker bombed it, wouldn't that change how people see him? So I think it's the biggest names are probably the obvious ones.
Here we go. Our favorite architect of Korean esports based Joe Marsh. Would you rather go on a public live stream therapy session with Dr. K or live stream debate session with Destiny talking to Slasher?
I mean, the problem with that one is he hasn't set it up well enough. I just take the Dr. K one easily because there's the thing. I could also just not tell him any stuff that I really care about my life, couldn't I? Whereas the other one, I actually wouldn't do that under any circumstances.
That's fair.
What would you rather do with the two?
I mean, do I have to participate in the debate?
I'm assuming that's the premise, yeah.
Yeah, if I don't have to participate in the Slasher Destiny conversation, if it's not mandatory, although I feel like I control both of them very effectively, so maybe I just do that. As a recent graduate from Florida State and Tallahassee local now, I agree that Riot had to be tripping on acid to have MSI here in the summer when school was out. One of the all-time great esports blunders. My question is, in an alternate timeline, would LFN run a LoL international event in Tallahassee if Riot permitted it? Any tournament format, any lineup? Of course. If Riot let LFN run an international tournament and they said it had to be in Tallahassee, we would do it.
I mean, you could still make it good. It's just a weird place to choose, isn't it?
That was peak comedy. Uh-oh. Here we go. I have a sermon to deliver to T1 fans as someone who likes to watch T1. If Gen.G wins another LCK, as someone who likes to watch T1, if Gen.G wins another LCK title over them in summer, I have a question for each of you. Monty, who do you think was the better Denver Bronco, Champ Bailey or Terrell Davis? That's a very interesting question, actually. Obviously, Terrell Davis was the one who was winning titles, who was winning Super Bowls with the Broncos, and Champ Bailey existed in a kind of mid-2000s era of the Broncos where they were pretty good, but not really good. So Champ Bailey is arguably the best corner to ever play the game, where I don't think, even though Terrell Davis peaked really hard, he had a short career, and I don't think anybody thinks Terrell Davis is the best running back of all time. So probably Champ Bailey.
His peak was crazy though. If Terrell Davis didn't have the injuries, his peak was just bonkers, wasn't it? I know.
Yeah, but he got 2 years of that, and then that was it forever. Thorin, I feel like we are going to have differing opinions on this player, but what is your opinion on the NBA player Chris Paul?
I actually think he's insanely underrated. Like, first of all, I actually think some of the teams he was on, if you look at the other players, they're not players that are going to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, I actually think a lot of his teams, he was really, really good. And one thing I think he's incredibly underrated on is one, he's not only a true point guard, which is the sort of dying breed in the NBA, but he's also actually a very clutch player. As much as that he's actually famous for like playoff letdowns or whatever. If you just put him into a normal game, even some playoff games, and it's in like the last minute, he's a mega clutch player, like scoring the basket. His teardrop was insane. I think he's actually a mega underrated player. He's one of those ones where people, for some reason, I think it's because he's like, it seems like a bit of a shitty human. Like, he's a very dirty player. Like, he literally, there's videos where you punch people in the balls and stuff. Like, he seems like a bit of a douche,
Really?
but like, skill wise, he's unbelievable.
Huh.
Yeah, I think he's incredibly skilled.
Strange.
And I think if they hadn't have vetoed that trade to the Lakers, I think him and Kobe would have won, mate. I think they would have won like the 6th title or whatever.
Mm. In your experience, can media personalities like, say, former StarCraft pros turn professional Wikipedia reader change as people, or is the cynicism around these kind of people well-deserved?
Right, run the question back. I'm tired, so I don't even know what the question was, mate. Run it back.
Can media personalities change as people? Basically, I mean, the question is really, can people change as people? And the answer is pretty much no.
I mean, they can't. Here's the thing. It's like the question about can the player stop choking? Like, I would say I've changed in some ways as a person, but I put an incredible amount of effort into it, and it took me a long time. So it's not something you're going to do overnight, though. I think in general, people are who they are. You can maybe mitigate some of the you could polish the rough edges off, as it were. But you essentially, I think the essence of who you are is almost eternal in a way.
If you could be the undisputed greatest human in the world at any one singular thing, what would you pick and why? Boxing, playing a specific instrument, etc.
I mean, instrument is a pretty fucking good one, isn't it? Because
writing is a pretty good one.
If you ever notice the people, yeah, but a lot of writers seem very tormented, you know? The difference is, if you ever see the really greatest musicians seem themselves to almost be able to zone out when they play, and they get like an immense amount of joy. If you notice that a lot of them seem actually, if they're not like on public, if they're sort of like in documentary, a lot of them seem to like be in love with music. Like, a lot of them are like fans of other great musicians, and like the joke is they might meet some other guy who's equally legendary, but they're like in awe of him. So I actually feel like that music does have a special sort of, maybe it'd be music. I think something like be the best guitarist ever would be pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Being the best at meditating would be pretty cool.
But then you just live on a mountain by yourself, and you're not engaged in reality, are you? So it depends
Yeah,
what
well,
your choice in
I
life
mean,
is.
but if you're good at meditate, if you're the best at meditate, doesn't matter. Doesn't. A story that was lost in the shuffle was Quid winning LCS MVP. That was weird. I'm pretty confused on why, since he wasn't the best player in the league, or his role, he wasn't. Jojo Pion was better, or the most valuable player to his team. That's an argument. I mean,
That's
are you
the
arguing
problem.
like
Let's be
River is?
real. Isn't the real reason he was the MVP? Because no one had 100 Thieves being second, and then he was the
Yeah.
obvious sort of pop off. So, like, I think to me, it's just a narrative one. It's like here's the classic example I brought out in my article. So they gave Scout the MVP last summer, Monty, but they gave all team first pro to Knight. Because what they were saying was, Scout, you were like the player who had to do the most, but you're not as good as Knight, if you get the premise. So I think that's what they were trying to imply by giving him the MVP.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I didn't like. I think Quid had a very good split, but like I don't think he was MVP.
It's also because he did the globe. He went from being a meme to actually pretty good. So it's like the globe fight could always give me. Yeah, it was whack though.
Are there any? All right, let's see here. What are your thoughts on David Lynch, and what's your favorite work from him? I mean, I think we both like David Lynch a lot.
Not a lot. I think he's good. I think he's a bit overrated though. Like, I think a lot of people who like his shit are doing that thing where they're just like, oh yeah, I totally get it. And it's like, I actually think the whole premise of his work comes out of like absurdism. I think you're not supposed to get some of it. Some of it is just kind of like cool things or aesthetic things he enjoyed, or like a weird turn. It's why, actually, spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it, if you actually do watch the later Twin Peaks stuff, not the original stuff, what made the original kind of cool was it just hinted or inferred stuff. In the later ones, he just sort of outright explains stuff, and I think actually that somewhat takes away from his work.
I haven't seen the later stuff.
I think he's a little bit overrated personally. I think my favorite of his is probably, it's either Lost Highway or maybe like Wild at Heart. I think those are the two I enjoyed the most. When he goes too far, like Mulholland Drive's about as far as I can go. Drive. I think Inland Empire is fucking complete trash. I wish I could unwatch that film.
I like Mulholland Drive. That's my favorite. Or the original Twin Peaks series. I was rewatching the Summoning Insight World's prediction orgy from 2016 when LS apparently started some controversy by stating that Crown had better mechanics than Bjergsen, and went on to say that Crown had the best mechanics of any player at that tournament. Obviously, Crown had a mega performance in 2016, but was a Malzbot when he won World 2017 who flamed out shortly after. From today's perspective, whose career would you rather have had, Crown's or Bjergsen's? I'd rather have Crown's.
Is that even a real question? I know. Bro, I'll never quite understand how people who are like NA people can talk trash on Europe when they don't win worlds, etc. But then they think Bjergsen's a god. Like, for real, there's a kind of person to this day still thinks like that if peak Faker was a 10, then Bjergsen was a 9. There's a real type of person that thinks that, mate. I've always said this. The thing that completely unravels his narrative is they claim he was the shot caller in most of his teams. Not a single one ever had world-class macro. Ever.
Yeah.
Now, he was very good within LCS. Like, he was super clutch there. He was Faker-esque in LCS, but I've never got that. Like, which would you rather be? Essentially, like a pretty good player, but by the way, who actually had an incredible lack of international performance, or like, as LS says, like a super stud for like, what, a year or two, and then win. I mean, even when he won Worlds, it's bullshit. He still won Worlds. Still did win Worlds. So I feel like you have to pick the Crown angle, surely.
You mentioned on the first 4-place set that Cosmic Horror you may have to revisit as you had a lot more you could go through. So could I ask what are some more of your must-see/read Cosmic Horror movies, books,
easy.
comics? Easy. I mean, Mouth of Madness is one we didn't do. That's probably mandatory.
That's better than Event Horizon, put it that way. It's got a similar actor, obviously. So that one's way
and
better.
also has Sam Neill. Yeah.
I mean, the one I actually recommended it on there, but we didn't watch it, was there's actually, I think the best Lovecraft movie is the movie Dagon, which is based on like the Terror at Innsmouth or whatever. That's like a mega one. Like, it's just the aesthetics really, really, really well done. It's not got like famous actors or anything, but they just capture the aesthetic in a way I've never seen before. Actually, if people don't know, Alan Moore wrote a bunch of Lovecraft-inspired work. Like, he wrote some stuff that wasn't that great initially because it came from short stories, but then he more recently tied it all together and did a story called Providence, where the idea is it's like he takes the actual history of Lovecraft's life and career and then mixes it with his stories in a way where you'd have to be a super fan like he is of Lovecraft to weave it all together, and then doing so tries to address like social issues and stuff. It's here's the thing, it's very, very transgressive, I'll just say that. But if you like Lovecraft stuff, I think it's a master of his art going ham on it. So I think that's a pretty good one. What else would you take?
Because I mean, obviously the Lovecraft books are going to be way up there. I mean, it's mandatory, you know.
What's your favorite story?
Mountains of Madness, maybe. So Cosmic Horror movies, I mean, a direct, adaptation. Nicolas Cage was recently in a version of The Color Out of Space, a film version that was pretty good. So if you want a recent Cosmic Horror movie, that would be one that not a lot of people have seen, but I thought was a pretty good adaptation of the Lovecraft story. Honestly, this extends into games as well. Fantasy Flight makes Eldritch Horror the board game, which is a Lovecraftian board game where it's a co-op game with other players where you team up against like Cthulhu, which is actually a very fun board game. So as a board gamer, I really like that. In a theoretical universe where Loco Doco doesn't leave the Korean esports scene after Mig Frost and Startail, what do you think he'd be doing right now? He'd probably be on the LCK broadcast, honestly. He'd be really good on that.
Or if you think of what Hooney does, he could slot right in there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically, I think he absolutely could kind of split the difference between the Korean side and the English side as to what Hooney does. I think that's probably would be a very good position for him. I'm working my way through Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and I'm absolutely loving it. I haven't read that book. Do you have any other books in the same wheelhouse that you can recommend, like pop philosophy?
I mean, the obvious one, I don't care about any of those books. Like, the obvious famous one is like Life of Pi or whatever the fuck, or like,
well,
what else?
Novel, but yeah.
I guess that's what he's talking about, isn't he? And then, well, who cares then? Like,
I mean, Cosmic Trigger?
It's not really like very mainstream, but yeah, if you like counterculture stuff.
Cosmic Trigger, there you go. How do you process negative feedback? I realize I can never be famous because even minor negative comments from my employees make me have a horrible day/week. I mean, the sad truth is you get used to it. It sucks. And the way you process it is by not engaging with it. You just have to build a shield in your mind away from it because it will make you go crazy.
Probably the most annoying thing is that you will be constantly gaslit by people who will never for 1 second experience in their life what it's like about what they would do and how much cooler they'd be and how they'd have restraint and they wouldn't react to anyone. Even though I've done this before, Monty, you've probably done it a few times. If you ever do the quote tweet of a little shitter with 10 followers, they melt down and spiral over finally having 1 second of that spotlight on them.
Yeah.
And they don't know that's your life every second that you check the replies. So that's why I don't read the replies. I've said this before. I don't read them.
Yeah, it's bad. But I think you learn methods that you cope with it. It's never fun. It's never easy. You just kind of become inured to it over time. But Pounder420, that is a funny comment, but I'm not going to read it. Hey lads, a few episodes ago, you both, mostly Monty, opined that you both thought The Sopranos and Sgt. Pepper's, two immensely popular pieces of art in their own mediums, hasn't necessarily aged well. While I certainly disagree, all right, food and golf, you like golf, we've been over this. I'm interested in you explaining a bit more of the reasons you believe they aged poorly, worse compared to other things. You compared Sgt. Pepper to Pet Sounds, for example. From articles to the endless podcasts that discuss the show, it is clear to me, as well as my belief, that the show is still incredibly significant and relevant. Oh, from The Sopranos. Outside of the masterful performances, it predicted the America we're now living in a decade plus before it happened. People still love Sgt. Pepper's. We're not saying they're not good. We're just saying that they're overrated. And also, I do think that both Sgt. Pepper's and The Sopranos were immensely influential. When I say they don't hold up well, I mean that they were very influential at the time, and like they broke new ground in many ways. But the problem is that in my mind, things like the Beatles and the Sopranos, people took what they did and then did what they did. They took it to the next step and did it better later. That's the problem. Is like nobody ever made Pet Sounds again. Like Pet Sounds, God Only Knows as a song still stands up immensely well today. And it's not like there was another Beach Boys that came along and did Beach Boys later. Like Beatles were absolutely influential in the rock and roll movement. It's just that later rock is just better than the Beatles, in my opinion. And later shows are better than the Sopranos. Sopranos absolutely broke new ground in prestige TV, serialized television, but other shows, I mean, it's just become so commonplace now that you can see basically every aspect of The Sopranos done better later, which is why I can recognize that it was groundbreaking. I can recognize its influence. I can recognize that it's good. I just don't think it is now the best. That's all.
I don't even think Sgt. Pepper's is good. I think the Beatles are one of the most overrated bands to ever exist in any context. I don't even give a fuck. Oh, but they grabbed it. Then the ground they broke was a ground I'm not interested in. I'm not even interested in most of the stuff that followed after. So I don't even. I actually think the better shit's like Revolver or something. That's about where I get off the fucking Beatles train. And then also, The Sopranos is really good. It just had the problem that when you're network TV, then they're going to run the franchise into the ground. So if they'd stopped it after a few seasons, it would have been great. But like everything, they had to keep going. And then by the end, it became mad diminishing returns. So one thing I do find, look, it's at least he phrased it politely, but every single variant of that question goes like this, but I like it, so convince me otherwise. No, I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to. I'm just telling you why I don't like it. And spoiler, shall I tell you the number one reason? This is what all the anime fans will never understand. Do you know why I also don't think the anime you like is as good as you think? I'm not a 20-year-old. I've seen a lot of other things, including other anime. So when I see other anime, I don't need to believe that Death Note was awesome at the end, because I've just seen so many great things. I don't need to be preoccupied by mind fucking myself. It was that good. When you get a bit older and watch other stuff, you'll also realize the folly of youth, that some of those things weren't as good as, like, guess what? Here's a prediction for you. In about 15 years, you will realize how badly Attack on Titan has aged. I don't think it was that great out the gate.
It's terrible now.
But it's good. But the problem is, to a person who's never watched stuff, Monty, it is mind blowing. And some of the like fucking twists and what they do with it, that's like, holy shit. And it's like, yeah, but just wait until you actually try real food. You're going, this fucking crushed pear's insane. Wait till you check out a fucking Wagyu steak, mate. It'll blow your mind.
Also, stick this in your pipe and smoke it. Paul McCartney described God Only Knows as the greatest song ever written. So think about that.
Well, at least whoever plays Paul McCartney now.
I have Nemesis' career in my brain summed up as the Washington Generals to Caps' Harlem Globetrotters. A good enough player, but mostly there to get windmill dunked on by the GOAT. I mean, Nemesis is like one of the, because he was a popular streamer. I don't even know if he still is a popular streamer. Because he was a popular streamer, and because he had the Fnatic brand cachet, people just like think he's so fucking good for some reason. He was never that good, guys.
Bro, here's the thing.
What is the cult of Nemesis? It's so fucking weird.
You know where well, it's just because it's parasocial relationship in it, mixed with the cachet of LS saying you're good. The big problem is this. You know how famously they would always tell me, stop going on about frogging. It was years ago. He was still an active pro. Nemesis last played in the LEC in what, 2021? Wasn't it something mad like that? Or was it even 2020? Let me look at it. I think it was 2021.
In a while.
Let me have a look. That was fucking 3 years ago, boys. That was ages ago. Oh, no, it looks like 2020 was the end of his career. Bro, it's 2024. Get over it. If you want, I've said this a million times.
He's not coming back, guys.
If he wants to be relevant, come back to a team. Otherwise, I don't give a fuck. Say whatever you want on your stream, dickhead. Pause it a million times. Explain how you knew or Reckless had autism. You insanely socially misaligned fucking cretin who doesn't even know that what he's saying doesn't make sense or is totally illogical or insanely insensitive. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to cancel you, mate. You cancelled your own career, dickhead. Peace.
What would you do? And do you think it's possible to get China and Korea into CS on the same level as League? How would we bolster the Chinese and Korean Counter-Strike?
I've said this a million times. No one cares to listen, so I'll say it for the millionth time. Right? How does it... Yeah, let's see if you can guess, Monty. How does a Korean boy encounter the esports game he wants to play?
Valve needs to make it into the PC bongs without having to install Steam and CS. Like, they need to make a deal. Yeah,
but it isn't. So as a result, it will never be the biggest game. By the way, the reason I know this works is because on some level, Valorant has succeeded where CS hasn't. And so the main problem is until you ever have the distribution and you understand the way it's done. And by the way, I would go ahead and say, I know they eventually made CSGO free to play. You have to, if you, in Asia, you should never launch paid games. They should all be free to play. If you care about loads of people playing the game, then also you probably want to do things like pay a massive amount of money and make an equivalent of an LCK and all these. If you don't do these things, then you don't court the right people. You're not going to do it. And then finally, I'll just put this out there. You can't, in my opinion, have 5 major esports from Korea or China. Like, it tends to be, especially Korea, they are so insanely homogenous. They're just about the main one. It's why whatever the main one is dominates the PC banks, dominates the collective consciousness of esports. So if you want to get in, you probably almost have to be battling with a League of Legends. You can't just be another game, I don't think.
Yeah, League of Legends is still like 50% of the total playtime of all games in PC bongs. It's crazy.
It's why the famous thing is, whenever you look at the PC bong list of the top 10, like number 9 is like 2% or 1.5%. So it's like at that point, even if you break in there, it doesn't mean anything.
I think the last time I looked, Valorant was at like 7% or something.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. But it was like League was like 48% or something the last time I looked.
Agreed.
Did the 2019 Team Liquid roster, Impact, Xmithie, Jensen, Doublelift, and KRYPTONITE feature all of the GOATs of each role for the LCS? Good question. So are Impact, Xmithie, Jensen, Doublelift, and KRYPTONITE all of the GOATs of the LCS?
I mean, people are going to say, like, look, if you're just talking only about LCS, Bjergsen probably has to be the GOAT, so I guess not Jensen, but he's a contender. If you want to say contender for the role,
Right. If you discount international performances, then you do say Bjergsen. But the longer Jensen's career goes on, the more likely he is to usurp Bjergsen. So.
That's true also. By the way, I do think the most hilarious thing about Xmithie's
It's probably not Xmithie, though. It's probably Meteos or Blabber. But
yeah, but here's the thing. I actually think Xmithie's career is hella underrated because this is why you can't play in the LCS if you're really talented. Because they never cared about his talent, Monty. They just wanted him to turn up, do a 9 to 5 clock in the shift, say all the right things in the review, be professional. And they didn't care that actually this guy was probably the most clutch jungler to ever play in that region. Like, this guy was just money every time it mattered. I mean, think about it, mate. I've never seen a Western jungler. I even think Jankos doesn't live up to this. So Xmithie might be the greatest Western jungler ever when he's facing an insane mismatch and he's behind in the game. Did this guy's mental ever break? He was unbelievable. That's why they have so many like comeback wins in team. He was fucking sick, mate. I do think he's actually criminally slept on because of all those stories. Like, he was drunk and then he was just getting up like and playing the game. It's like, mate, you can even spin that in like a cool narrative. Look, I don't appreciate it from a professional standpoint, but he had a special talent other people didn't. I've heard from so many teammates that shit's real, that he just was like some fucking mega mind for the game, like intuitively.
Do you think we focus too much on hand than brain in NA? Feel like a lot of the time players can't just evaluate game states and do the wrong plays. So basically saying like micro matters more than macro in NA. I think most pro players are deceived by this because hands are how they get to be pro players, and they're only trained in their minds once they are pro players. So you always over evaluate hand versus brain.
I mean,
You
the
always
best
do as a pro
example
player.
would be they do, including Dom, call Blabber the NA GOAT of jungling, but I think Xmithy is better because Xmithy plays with his mind. Whereas
Yeah.
Blabber is essentially just like every year he's just the 9th best LPL jungler who happens to play in the LCS. So to me, I think the flaw, I'll tie it into what you just said, is because they evaluate, but there are a lot of Counter-Strike pros like this, the stars, they just evaluate aim and eyes, as it were, and hands rather. So what they do is they become arrogant because they have more skill than you and miss that you might actually have a better understanding of the game than me and beat me using that in the game. And they even will go, I shouldn't have lost. It's like, mate, we're not playing. It's not the 100 meters race. We're doing like I mean, the best example ever is what Artosis used to say about StarCraft. It's sort of like fucking like chess, but like with a live action component. It's like chess ballet or something like that. You know, that's like, it's got the hands element. You've got to be brilliant, but you also got to have strategy too. So I do think essentially they mistake skill for being the ultimate be all end all metric.
The pro player attitude is basically, it goes like this. Well, if I had hit this skill shot, we would have won the team fight. When the real answer is, why were you taking that team fight in the first place? A lot of the time. Like, you could have won, but the better play is just not to take that team fight at all. And that is missed because they exist in a world where they want the agency to be about them, not about the things that they could say to their team or macro play. So I would say it's not just NA, it's everywhere that overvalues that. But in NA, it's also because of individualistic versus collectivistic culture. So in Korea, obviously the teamwork is paramount. So I think they're more receptive to listening to macro ideas. Whereas NA players are like, fuck that. I could have just outplayed him and then we would have won. It's like, well, that's why you suck at an international level, because you can't outplay those players in Asia and you have no macro. So good job. Now you have nothing. Team Liquid is different, though, this year. Like, Team Liquid actually appears to be focusing on macro, which is fun. If Chovy Golden Roads this year playing at his current form, how strong does this GOAT case get? Pretty strong.
Like I said earlier, the reason why you could immediately make it is because you could just say, what about for a single year? You could say peak level, right? I already think like he's unbelievable what he can do in the game. So if you don't want to make it like the entire career, like longevity, you wouldn't have in the same degree, but his peak year might be better than Faker then, right? Why not? Yeah. You have to consider it.
Having a Golden Road year and winning 5 consecutive domestic titles would be pretty fucking nutty.
You could also argue it's way harder to Golden Road in this era with the LPL existing than it was for Faker. He just had his own people. He just had to basically beat Rock Tigers, etc., didn't he? And all those
basically, in the Faker era, it was easier to win Worlds, but harder to win LCK. Whereas now it's easier to win LCK, but harder to win Worlds. Is basically it. And MSI now, because now there's 2 harder. Yes. Yeah, MSI is 1,000,000 times harder than it used to be. Do you think Masu is next in the lineage of North American AD carries who are weak laners yet excel in team fights, following the likes of Sneaky and Danny? I think it's hard to evaluate Masu's laning because of Busio, right? Like, the question is, if Masu had spring playoffs core JJ as his support, the question is, how good is he then, right? Because I think Masu as a rookie needs a lot of help, and Busio is not the guy to help him with like lane states or macro or any of this stuff. In terms of pure hands, Masu's pretty fucking amazing, guys. His mechanics are very good.
Here's the joke. There's actually a bizarre thing that happened in League of Legends and Counter-Strike where, you know, the Chinese AD carry, it's written Uzi, but it said like Uzi I. And then we had a player, he's actually one of the people who got like banned for match fixing back in Counter-Strike. That was a French player called Uzi, but it was written like UUZZZII, right? So it's like, you should swap names. There's a guy, he actually played for Evil Geniuses of Valorant and won champions, the World Championship, called Boostio. He should get rid of that name because he won the World Championship. He should. I always see Busio and think you should be called Boostio, mate. Swap the name. So yeah, I think with that player, like it's a 2-man lane. Like, I actually think Masao looks really good, mate. I'm very excited for the rest of his career.
Yeah, he's good. Do you think kernel level anti-cheats like Vanguard are necessary? Well, we will be dealing with that next week, guys. Yeah, we'll answer that later. Monty, what are your opinions on the Broncos offseason so far? Well, the tank is beginning, guys. I mean, basically, the Broncos should have reset themselves like 3 or 4 years ago, but decided that they would just band-aid quarterback position forever. Now, I think it is incredible hindsight analysis to say that trading for Russell Wilson was always going to be a huge bust because, like, pretty much everybody, including me, was in favor of doing it at the time.
Of course.
You couldn't have known he would be that bad. You couldn't have known that the coaching situation would be that bad. But I think with, you know, the new ownership, Sean Payton being there, we'll see how good Bo Nix is. Like, quarterbacks are always a crapshoot. So I don't watch college football, so I really don't have any opinions on their draft. Like, I don't fucking know anything about any of the players that they drafted. I'll also have to wait and see how they perform at the professional level. But I think, like, you got to tank at this point in time. They haven't had any draft picks for the last few years. They have no young talent to build off of. You might as well just be as shit as possible. So let's just say I'm not super excited about the new season. Like, basically, it's like, is Bo Nix good, or like, could he be good? Is basically what I'm looking for. But I don't think they're going to be an interesting team to watch particularly.
Dude, the worst thing is they don't even have any old legends. You can sort of just keep watching. It's like they don't have much right now.
Well, they got rid of Justin Simmons, who was their best defensive player, arguably, or, you know, they still have Pat Surtain, I guess, but, like, you know, their team captain and the longest serving Bronco, they just cut him to save money, which, and like, I hope he goes to a better team where he can actually compete, because he's a great guy and he's a really good safety. So that would be awesome. But, I mean, I don't think anybody really has hope, right? Like, I'm more interested in the Bears than I am the Broncos, considering, you know, their draft.
Upgrades are very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and like, their receiving core is now very interesting. If Caleb Williams could pop off in his first year, it could be really fun actually to watch the Bears. So, yeah, I think in terms of bum-ass teams, I'm more interested in other bum-ass teams than my own bum-ass team. But, you know, you just have to do this at some point in time. You have to pull the Band-Aid off. This is how you eventually get better, is just like sinking to the very bottom. You suck for a while, but you can get better quickly. The Texans are also going to be a fun team to watch next year. So fun times. Did the term Jungle Canyon come about or get popularized because of Canyon? No, it was before Canyon. Yeah, it preceded it. Canyon, it's just incidental. It's coincidental. Why can the Last Free Nation network get sponsors, but Travis Gafford Industry has 0 sponsors?
I mean, I'll tell you a very obvious reason.
I mean, I could tell you the reason.
It's a different skill set. It's like, that's one thing in esports, just like pro players, we're not immune to this. People get good at one thing and go, I am not good at one thing. I am just good at everything. And then they think so they think that, like, getting sponsors is just going, hey man, want to, like, sponsor this YouTuber? Like, I got like double lift that night alien. It's like, that's not what you have to learn. Is like, in the same way as if you learn the law, when you're a layman, you think they're speaking English, and then speaking legalese, it sounds like English, but you have to know exactly their way of talking. Business is like that. Until you learn, like, the patois of how you speak to a businessman and what they actually care about, and things like, you've seen things like Mad Men and movies, guys, and you're thinking you pitched them some crazy idea. They care more about things like, right, do the metrics make sense? Does your projections make sense? What's your business proposal? Do you understand core concepts? Like, can you negotiate? By the way, if you fuck up the negotiations, they also might think less of you about what the idea is. So to me, it's a totally different skill set. And I don't know Travis at this point in his career, so I have no idea whether he's actually leveled up in that regard or whether he's just being chill. I have no clue.
So here's the thing. Travis was always reliant on agents. And the problem with that is that he was represented by Loaded, which also represents Ninja and a bunch of the other huge streamers. So effectively, the problem with his business strategy is that he was selling himself as basically an esports influencer, but he's not the biggest esports influencer, and he's not the biggest influencer, period. So he's always way down on the sales list for an agency like Loaded. I think he's with Doublelift's agency right now, but Doublelift obviously does much bigger numbers than him. And he didn't figure out. So the reason what we did with LFN is, like, you have to craft a business plan and a business idea. And what we do with LFN is we sell podcasts, right? Travis has a podcast, but then he also just creates a bunch of other content, streams on his own. He's much more similar to, like, you know, just any old streamer out there or YouTube creator. And he's very small by those standards, right? If he was just doing podcasts, the thing that we do with LFN is, the reason we have sponsors is because we go through the podcast budget door. There are companies that set aside budgets specifically for podcasts. These do not go to Ninja. They don't go to XQC. They don't go to Pokimane. Those are separate like creator influencer budgets. We don't really touch those. What we do is we sell a package of podcasts that goes into a podcast budget. And by doing so, we are also immune to esports winter because none of the companies for podcast budgets give a shit about whether esports are good or not. They only go, does your podcast have numbers? Our podcasts do have numbers. We do like 1 million downloads a month. And they're like, oh, great. Well, there's an audience. And here's our demographic, guys. It's, if it fits with the demographic, they just like it. So we are a media company. We are not an esports company. The problem with Travis is that he is a small, very small influencer compared to major streamers. He has his content's all over the place. Some of it's a YouTube video. Some of it's, leaking, doing journalism or being a leaker. That's part of it, making videos about that. Doing interviews. It's all over the place. So you can't sell into a podcast budget. And if he did, it would only be for Hotline League. And Hotline League is very small, honestly. Like Hotline League is smaller than almost every single one of Last Free Nations show in esports. And it's harder to sell the smaller shows. So I think he has a lot of issues, but primarily it's because esports is a curse word. So he can't get, nobody's interested in sponsoring esports content. So that's why we as a media company are different, because we're not selling esports. We're simply selling podcasts, and it could be any podcast. We just have a demographic. Our advertisers don't really care. His podcast isn't big enough to sell. He doesn't have enough podcasts to sell. We sell across a network that does way more podcast downloads than he does.
I mean, you notice there's an obvious flaw in his business model. He just wants to do like one show.
Yeah.
Bro, that's like trying to compete with Marvel and DC, and you do one comic book a month. Well, they do like, what, 100? Like, mate, you have to grind. I've always thought this. You have to hustle if you want to make it in this industry.
Well, it's also that his other content can't be sold into podcast budgets. Like his interviews can't be sold into podcast budgets. His leaks of like LCS moving into best of threes can't be sold into podcast budgets. And he doesn't create a podcast to give these leaks. He creates a video. Like his business model is just fucked, basically. So there's not really fixing it. And he is both a very small streamer and a very small influencer. So if you want to buy an influencer, you're not buying Travis. And if you want to buy a podcast, he's got one that has, his total podcast viewership is probably 5% of LFNs on a monthly basis, maybe 10%. I mean, Hotline League's viewership is not great anymore. So I don't know, guys. Like, it's a tough time when you could just like take the esports budgets when all the companies were like, I'm going to spend on esports. He could do very well, but that model doesn't really work anymore.
You also can't just live on the Riot teat forever. Like, there's a reason why we always use that joke, like Sauron doesn't share power. Eventually, they turn on everyone. It's happened to every single person ever.
Yeah. Did you guys watch the Brady roast? And what are your thoughts on doing roast in esports? I haven't seen it. I mean, it could be funny to do roast in esports, but you'd have to have the right group of people. And it'd be too complicated to set it up, really. Could be funny, though.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. But, well, the joke is, I've said this in the past, the obvious one to do would be do a charity roast of me, but like raise the money for some like good cause or something.
Sure,
and then have like all people like Richard Lewis and Monty and all these other people, and they do like a proper roast. But we're not just going to do it for no reason, are we?
Maybe in the future. It's not a bad idea. Do you guys have your own stuffed animals? Does that mean like stuffed animals of us, or like do we own them? I mean, I did as a kid. I still have my childhood stuffed animal, but I don't actively have stuffed animals.
I'm not sure.
I really know what that question is. I don't spend a lot of time on that. That was all it. So those are all of our questions for this week, guys. Got through them all as usual. Thank you to our Discord subscribers. And if you would like to ask questions, subscribe to our Discord, ask in the SI Questions channel, and we will get back to you next week. As I've stated before, SI is going to be on at a different time than usual because I am in America and because of MSI schedule. Monday is the MSI day off, so that's when we're doing SI. It does start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. What is it, 4 p.m. Central European time, Thorin?
I wasn't listening to what the time you said. What was the time in Pacific?
7 Pacific, 7 a.m.
Yeah, 4 p.m.
4 p.m. Central European time if you guys are in Europe. So thank you very much. We'll see you Monday, same time.